The meeting of the Dudley-Charlton Regional School Committee is now in session. It is Wednesday, October 21st. October 24th. It is 7 p.m. and we're at the Charlton Middle School. We will all stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our regular meeting of Wednesday, October 10th.
So moved. Second.
Discussion? Catherine?
Just gonna go- On page 6, I saw one mistake. It said, about 6 sentences up from the bottom, this is a corner point, the 3 school committee members, it should be 2. It's on page 6, right underneath the bullets. You see it, Sandy? Okay, thanks. Was that yours?
You missed the grammatical.
I saw some, but I figured I'm past that stage.
Are you past it too?
I'll point to that to Sandy, but I do have something to add on page 4 on the bottom. I'd like to add a statement that Mrs. Rabbit asked for further information for students with disabilities scoring in the warning category. And on page 6, we might have discussed it at the meeting, and I'm not sure if I'm confusing my timeframes, but there's a statement, the 5th one up from the bottom, that says the committee asked Mrs. Rabbit to come back with a recommendation for the search committee at the October 24th meeting. We decided what the composition was, and Mrs. O'Coin and I are meeting on October 31st to select the members of the search committee, so I don't know if that statement is going to be contradictory to what we're doing.
Okay.
You want to delete it?
I'd like to delete it. I think it's confusing.
Anyone else? Elaine, did you have anything else? or
No, I'm all
that's
set.
all?
Thank you.
All right, all in favor? Kathy, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. And that brings us to approval of the warrants, and this evening, we do have warrants that need to be signed. And that brings us to Citizens Forum this evening. Do we have anyone that would like to come forward to speak with us? Okay, you can make your way up to the table.
We've never been here before, so we don't know the
Yeah.
process
The
of what we're supposed
process,
to do.
you're free to speak, but have a seat, and then
Can we have more
tell us
seats?
your name and
Just bring them over.
Yeah, come on over. We get a couple more seats. Oh, they come with their seats.
and you can tell us your names and where you're from,
Okay.
what town.
My name is Michelle Thompson. I'm from Dudley.
Okay,
Kristen Lukasevich. I'm not from here, but my son was here at
Okay.
one point. We live in Douglas.
all right.
Joe Thompson from Dudley.
Kim Adams from Webster.
Joe Magnuson, Charlton.
Okay, and feel free, whoever wants to start.
Okay, well, we have some concerns that we feel we've gone through the proper channels and we have spoken to, so this all is pertaining to the Shepherd Hill football team. We all either have kids that are playing, have played, or part of the team at this point. And we met with the superintendent and principal last week, and they were very appreciative of us stepping forward, heard our concerns regarding complaints that have been made against the coaches. I don't know if I'm even allowed to say what coaches, but the head coach of the Shepherd Hill football team was our main concern. His behaviors and actions and the treatment of the kids on this football team is unbelievably inappropriate and unacceptable. And although we feel as though the principal and superintendent heard us and are trying to take action, I don't know that the appropriate action has been taken, and we want to escalate this to the next level. This is a continued cycle of repeated abusive behavior by this coach, by bullying and demeaning and belittling these players, calling them names after practices. I'd like to kind of go through some of the bullets that were specifically brought up to the superintendent, if that's appropriate.
I think, because you did go to the top, the school committee does not handle personnel matters, it's the superintendent. So this is public, so you don't want to bring in anything like that. The only thing I can tell you is the superintendent can give one of you a call, go over what has been done or whatever. She uses her own judgment, and the school committee has nothing to do with it.
Okay,
It's the
so,
superintendent.
okay,
So
so,
that's how I'm going to refer it to Dr. Nash for, she will deliberate on it and then give someone a call, okay?
so can I just say that she did reach out to us and tell us that she's not at liberty to discuss personnel decisions.
Okay.
However, the kids have been told, so we were praised for having come forward because this has been ongoing for years,
Right.
years.
So-
And finally, parents had the nerve enough, for fear of retaliation and fear of all this other stuff that this coach has been doing for years. We finally came forward, and had the courage, putting ourselves and our kids out there to be further belittled and demeaned and bullied.
Right.
And they're not able to share what the decisions that were made. We're told that this coach was suspended for 1 game.
Well, legally, she can't divulge
I
what
can't
was
discuss
that.
personnel
That's,
issues.
that's legal.
Whether it's a coach or whether it's
A teacher
staff
or
member.
an employee.
And I do think I responded, I don't know if it was to Mrs. Thompson, or whoever it was, because someone had gotten back to me after we had met.
So it has been solved. I'm sure Dr. Nash handled it, and it has been solved.
So we have no recourse if
Yeah,
we're
no,
not,
the
if
school
we're not
committee-
satisfied with a 1-game suspension for this bullying behavior.
We don't even know if it was one, we're not aware because legally, she cannot divulge
Okay.
that personnel matter.
Is there any prudence in all of us submitting bullying incident reports? I mean, we don't want to go after this coach personally and have him lose his job, but if he's bullying the football players, any of this stuff that was done in the classroom would be completely terms for termination.
There is a bullying policy, and certainly, it has a process, it's an investigatory process, similar to the allegations that you made, I think, when you were meeting with myself and Mr. Chaplin. So it's a similar process to what probably Mr. Chaplin did in conducting his investigation, in that an investigation is conducted, and consequences are meted out or not meted out.
So let me ask this, again, this is hearsay because this hasn't come from you. We were told that the head coach was asked to resign his position. He refused. If someone is asked to resign their position and they refuse, and then they're given a 1-game suspension, that seems odd to me, that somehow this person is being protected by someone somewhere politically.
But that's hearsay. We don't know what happened. So
Okay.
right now, I'm going to cut this short because there's nothing that we can do this evening, and it will be referred again to the superintendent.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
If there ever were an opportunity that, or that's not the right word, if there ever were happening that this happens again in the future, as I would understand the law, you have the ability to come forward again and notify the appropriate personnel so that additional investigations could occur. Is that correct, Dr. Nash?
Well, we conduct an investigation, and in accordance with the investigation, it leads us somewhere. It leads us to make a decision. Not everyone likes decisions that are made, whether it's about a staff member, a teacher, a coach, or anybody else. As I indicated, a decision has been made.
And not everybody's going to agree with a decision once a decision
But I'm
is made.
sorry, I was moving past that. I was saying, if this were to
If in fu-
happen again,
With respect to coaching appointments, they're year-to-year appointments.
can I ask a question?
because this happened last year. And I sent my letter to Mr. Desto, to Mr. Chaplin, to Stephanie. You all received my letter. You received my letter this year. So it did happen last year. That's why my son is no longer there. He left. We told him in September he was not coming back to this school system.
You sent your letter to me, you're right, as a follow-up. I think I
And
responded.
You did, yes. No,
to
you did. Yes, you
And
did.
simply said, I have to deal with the present, not with the past. I understand that.
Correct.
I'm cutting
But I
this
just,
short.
I do
Wait.
have a question, though. Like you said, if it comes up again next year, well, next year there's a new superintendent. Is it going to be the same issue again where I can't look at last year's information? So what's the
Recommendations for
point?
appointments for coaching positions come from the building principal. They're generally made, and I think I'd indicated that to your group when we had met, they're generally made, fall appointments are generally sent up somewhere in the spring. My sense would be that with every coaching position, that principal looks at them, has some conversations with an AD, sends something forward to the superintendent, whoever is sitting there, whether I'm sitting here in the spring and getting those, or whether the new person is getting that. But those recommendations come directly from a
Dr.
principal.
Nash, I'm going to cut this
Sure.
short, because they came to you, you spoke to them, and if they're not satisfied, then they can give you another call. And I didn't get, where are you from? Are you from Dudley?
No, I'm from Douglas.
Okay, so thank you. And if you're not satisfied, Dr. Nash, you can give her a call again.
How can we find out what the result
You
was of the
cannot
investigation?
find out what the result is.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mrs. O'Quinn, I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I'd like to have executive session. We can't discuss personnel matters in public, but I certainly think that we're going to need an executive session to be able to gather information regarding this and discuss this.
If we do have executive session, we have to have the personnel we're going to speak about
Okay,
in the meeting, or a lawyer or
You can
whatever.
also request an open meeting.
Yeah,
He has the right.
He has the right.
If you're talking about a person.
yeah.
Right,
So we
but-
have no right to talk about them, and
Okay, I
I don't
understand that.
think personnel
Is
per
your
se
under-
is our
It isn't.
domain.
Right.
It's a superintendent, according to the law.
right.
So I don't think we should get into it. We don't decide who is hired, who is fired, so that's why I cut it
Site-based.
short, okay? I don't think we should have an executive session on this, because I don't think it's our domain to do that. And Dr. Nash, you know that.
I wouldn't be able to really get into any discussion, because it isn't the domain of a school committee anymore with personnel. It's site-based, under ed reform. Principal deals with discipline issues and makes decisions.
It's very troubling, the nature of what their complaint is. I just feel very unresolved about it.
I agree with that completely. Don't we have the ability to discuss under the auspice of caring for the children, even if we don't talk about the individual, we could talk about standards that we think need to be met for care for children?
Oh, we can always do that. But, I mean, we have a chain of command, and by law, the principal decides. If they're not satisfied, they go to the superintendent. That's where it stops. It doesn't come to us at all. So, I think we'll let Dr. Nash for now handle that, okay? Okay, that brings us to communications. Dr. Nash, do you have any
No, I do not.
communications? Okay, how about our members? Any communication?
Just to put on a future, to bring to people's attention that the governor signed dyslexia legislation on Friday, which is going to require dyslexia screening for beginning at kindergarten, for the kindergarten students. And I think we should be preparing for that, as far as whether or not we have the right materials and we're prepared for that, changing the dynamic for students coming in at kindergarten.
Does that start this school year, 2000?
I meant to print it and didn't, and I'm sorry, I apologize. I'll forward it to you.
Okay, I think it's next.
It was Senate Bill 2607.
Any others?
I have something. I just wanted to bring up a program that is actually taking place at the Charlton Public Library. They have a lot of great educational programs that go on. And there's a presentation of a documentary called Screenagers, Growing Up in the Digital Age, that's taking place on Thursday, November 11th from 6 to 8 p.m. You have to get tickets, but it's a documentary that can only be viewed at screenings like this. And it talks about the biggest parenting issue of our time, depicting teen struggles over social media, video games, and internet addiction. And the authors, psychologists, and brain scientists reveal how tech time impacts kids' development and offers solutions on how adults can empower their kids to best navigate the digital world, find balance, and provides practical resources to help them do it. I have a couple of friends who have seen this screening at other locations, and they said it was phenomenal. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. Anyone else? And I do not have communications this evening. Superintendent's report, special topics report, district office reorganization, and proposed timeline and process.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the committee will note that at one of its prior meetings, you had asked that I speak to or address a report that was part of an evaluation, albeit somewhat brief, last spring that Glenn Kuchar, who is the executive director of MASC, had prepared for the committee. In particular, the report looked at the district's central office organizational structure, and I think it came in light, as my background information indicates, came in light of the fact that there were some changes that were happening at central office, some interim positions, certainly from the superintendent to curriculum director, and with the former superintendent leaving the position. I provided for you, just as a reminder, some of the highlights in the report, and I'd like to go over them because he didn't just look at central office structure. He looked at really trying to begin to cultivate, as a lot of districts like to do, some leadership positions that would put in place a program or a plan for succession in a district. He also talked about the need to really look at delegating responsibilities from the superintendent as well as from other members of central office staff. Part of that plan in looking at central office would be certainly to look at the current job duties and responsibilities of individuals in central office, as well as to really articulate clearly job descriptions that are approved by the school committee. In addition to that, he mentioned the fact that there needed to be a process, if you will, or at least the ability to have, particularly in central office, people cross-trained. In effect, in a small district as we have, one person knows their job very well, but if they're out for a period of time, we have to ensure that that happens. And so that's something that I know that we discussed at our first central office staff meeting. So part of this proposal, and it's a proposal for a process and timeline, it is not a proposal for reorganization. It would be folly for me to think that in a short period of time I could come up with a plan that I know that district this well, and that I would be able to look at all of the components that make up an educational organization, such as a public school district. So the focus of my proposal will be limited to examining the district's organizational structure, but to expand it. And my proposal asks that we expand it beyond just looking at central office organization. Because as you know, when you look comprehensively at an organization like a school district, you need to look at all of those departments, if you will, all of those areas that impact student learning. So I broke it down into 5 components. It certainly could be broken down further than that, but 5 major components that I would suggest to you would be part of a proposal. Those areas that I would suggest that we would look at as a more comprehensive study than just looking at central office would certainly start with and look at central office administration as well as the support staff in central office. Another related area to central office, but a separate entity, is finance and related operations to finance. The third component is facilities, both vertical and horizontal, so you want to look at both buildings and grounds, and look at your staffing needs, your current staffing, as well as what you may feel in the future you would need. And the two areas that speak to me and the two areas that I think are critical to everything else, are student services. Those would be all of the services related not just to special needs, but to all other services that we provide students, i.e. around counseling, around testing, around health, around guidance, and all of that. And then the last area is teaching and learning, and in particular to look at the emphasis that Glenn Kuchar made in his report was, how do we cultivate some leadership positions in a school district? There are many individuals who may not want to be administrators, but they would love it if there were positions that were administrative positions other than leading a building, in areas around curriculum, for example. Currently, we have really 2 district leaders, but we don't have any mid-management leaders in curriculum. So the emphasis in that area would be to look at what we currently have and to potentially make some recommendations. The rationale behind looking at a more comprehensive study is that every department in a school is interrelated. You can't really study one without knowing that by making changes there, it's going to have some kind of an impact on some other department. As I indicated, teachers impact students, students impact our resources, and certainly both of them impact the facilities and the buildings they're in. Other facilities impact the students and our staff. So my recommendation is, first and foremost, that we broaden the scope of this. And in doing that, I am here to say that I would not feel that I would be able to adequately do all of the 5 areas in the time that I'm here, and that my best impact, if you will, can be felt if I focused on those areas that impact teaching and learning, and that would be student services and the teaching and learning area. And that part of the proposal would be that you would allow me to go forward to get a cost proposal from a group such as Mars, who is made up of retired superintendents. Many of them obviously are regional school superintendents who could come forward potentially and look at those other 3 areas if the committee so chooses to do a comprehensive examination of your organizational structure. Certainly it's up to the committee as to which way you'd like to proceed. But I think in the scope of time that I'm here between now and the end of the school year, if that's the case, then I would certainly be able to focus on those 2 areas, areas 4 and 5, but I don't think that I could adequately focus on what needs to happen in the other 3 areas, particularly in central office. I think it's important for us to speak with all of the individuals and know exactly what they do currently and how that does compare with any job description that does exist, and then to look at where there needs to be some either overlapping or there needs to be maybe a different framework or model based on future needs. Because part of your organizational structure, as I think I gave you in the Hanover research material, is that the effectiveness of central office, and the reason that central office exists is really to ensure that good teaching and learning happens. I mean, that's the reason why you're here, and the most effective central office organizational structures are those that best support that. So what I'm looking for really is for either the committee's blessing or not, or any variation of that, to move forward, to get a cost proposal from Mars for any of those areas, none of those areas, or for me to not focus on any of this. So I really wanted to throw that out here for you people to look at and to have some feedback as to how you'd like to proceed, because I know that the time that it's going to take to do it effectively will probably eat into a lot of the work that needs to happen just in a day-to-day basis in this position. So,
Kathy,
Catherine.
just for that reason, I would suggest that maybe we should think about postponing this till the new superintendent is hired. We have so many things going on right now. We have the policy committee, we have budget, We have negotiations with staff and the sports, which is in the spring, the support staff. We've got so many things on, and most importantly, we're hiring a new superintendent. I think it would be really unfair to do all this work before the new superintendent comes in. So I'm going to make a motion that we postpone this until the new superintendent is hired, just because of the logistics of it. Plus, I think that person should put their stamp on that program.
Do I have a second?
Second for discussion.
Okay. More discussion?
I would disagree with that. I think that we have several positions that are currently interim that we need to make some decisions about, and it's really important how we set that up. I think the incoming superintendent is going to have a lot on their plate, and they would probably appreciate having some things already underway and some things in definition stage, especially if we embarked on an effort where we solicit Mars, who has experience in this area, to help define some of these aspects. And as Dr. Nash said, there's a lot of interrelatedness amongst the different functions in this organization. It's a very large organization, and we do need to look at it comprehensively. And I, for one, would like to take advantage of Dr. Nash's experience and input on the two areas that she can make an impact on while she's here.
Anyone else?
I'd like to know what kind of figure, Mars. We keep paying these extra things here, $9,500 for the superintendent, now another whatever for them, another for something else. It keeps adding up, and I think at this point, the money could be better spent for the coming year.
I think Kathy has a good point, because I think a new superintendent should have a lot of input into this reorganization of our central office.
A couple things. From reading the material that Dr. Nash presented and from her explanation tonight, I don't believe that she's presenting this in a manner that we're going to complete any kind of study and have any kind of answers, by the end of the school year. I think to do a comprehensive study and to not only look at the positions and what they do, but look at the fiscal impact is going to take time. I don't find the benefit in postponing it for a couple of reasons. One, just in the time that we've been spending in the office working on policy, there is a lot of inefficiency, and the inefficiency is actually costing us more money to be inefficient than it is to look at these things and perhaps clarify and streamline and effectively use the talented personnel that we have in the district. Secondly, I think we're sitting with someone who has a tremendous background and experience of many, many years in all of these functions, that we have a great unlikelihood that our incoming superintendent is going to come in with this bank of knowledge. So when you're sitting here looking to gain the expertise of the person who's currently sitting in the seat and look at an organization that can also come in and provide you that kind of expertise, Dr. Nash is working it day to day. She's seeing it. An incoming superintendent isn't going to be able to give us this kind of insight and work with all of the work they're going to need to do to come in and learn the district. So for that reason, I think it's to our advantage to begin this work, because I don't think this work is going to be done before the end of the school year. And similar to what's happening with the policy situation is we put things off because we have work to do. We have no idea what's going to come next year onto our caseload of things that also need to be done. So I think we need to really take the time to look at this, allow Dr. Nash to look into Mars. I've seen Mars work in this field. I attend Mars meetings. I've seen the type of work that they do regarding this. I know that the cost structure is an hourly rate. We would most likely have to put parameters on it. Because it's not a full comprehensive study. They might be able to give us a figure, but I certainly think it's well worth the time to gather that information, come back and look at it again. And if Dr. Nash is comfortable, I think the two areas that she's focusing on are two areas right now that we have a person who's new to their position and a person who's in an interim position. So this work needs to be done. The two areas that she wants to focus on has to be done anyway. because we have new people in those roles. So I don't see the benefit of waiting.
I'm concerned that you say there's inefficiency up in that office, because when I go there, I think they're very efficient, so I'm kind of sad to hear that, because I think they do a wonderful job up there.
We're not, and it has nothing to do with the fact that people do a wonderful job. It's the fact that the work that they're doing takes 10 times the amount of time and energy that it should, because we don't have systems in place.
How do we know that? It
We're
takes
going to
that
talk
time.
about it when it comes up to policy. It's part of the policy update.
Can I propose that maybe we can get a rough estimate of cost and talk about it at our next meeting?
I don't, that was my intent.
That was the
My
intent.
intent was first to see how you wanted to proceed, because this was something that you asked me to
Right
look
now,
at.
we've got this motion
I
on.
know, I guess.
This was not something I offered to do, in the sense, you remember you had this report and
Right,
asked me
right.
to come
Sure,
back.
we did.
So,
I guess
I would,
my
and you may
opinion-
want to narrow the focus down of those areas, because certainly, for budget purposes and planning, it would be great to know for the future, if you decided to look at a certain area and there was a need to add staff, let's say, as a recommendation. So certainly that's helpful, but you certainly can narrow the focus. It's really up to the committee, or you can ask me to get a cost per hour, however it would be, and ask them to give us an estimate. If I tell them we're looking for someone to come in and look at these 3 areas or these 2 areas, what do you estimate the cost could be? You know, I would come back to you at a meeting.
And
All I
go
meant
ahead.
to say was, I don't feel comfortable making a decision with the information that we have right now. I would feel more comfortable having a definitive, yes, I agree with you, or
Right.
yes, I agree with you, if I knew what we were talking. If we're talking $20,000, or are we talking $5,000? I feel like that gives a better understanding of what our commitment
Right.
financially is.
That would
And
be the
Cap-
next step in the process. I don't think it would probably take a great deal of time for them. If you want me to have them look at less than those areas, then there's no sense for me to say, look at the 3, look at 1 through 3. If you want me to just say, look at 1, then then the cost is going to be different. So if I could get some direction from the committee, that would make it
And
easier and
Catherine's
more efficient.
motion is not against this. She just thinks we have a lot on our plate this year.
Yep, I understand.
And putting a new superintendent in place next year, I think he should have input into this. And
So I'm going to
that's,
come back, 'cause I
so
think-
she just is, her motion is just for the postponement,
I understand.
not against the reorganization.
So I
Go
think
ahead.
Dr. Nash's point was to seek out further information before we made a decision one way or the other, what we were doing. So I think it's ahead of the process to postpone it without having full information. So I think we should seek out what the cost is of gathering this kind of support. Like most everything that we seem to be doing, I think we need to look at what would the cost be if we were to do this in phases. I don't anticipate that we're going to come to any conclusion and be doing anything that isn't going to include an incoming superintendent, but I think we would be missing the opportunity to be working with Dr. Nash and laying the foundation for that incoming superintendent to be able to have some preliminary information to begin working with. That would be my thing. I think we need to gather further information, come back, and when we have cost information, then the committee can then look at whether or not they want to postpone it or they want to move forward with it.
Anyone else? Okay, all in favor of the postponement? All opposed? Motion carries, 5,
Oh, it's defeated.
yeah, but 5 to 2, defeated, sorry. Okay, so Dr. Nash, you can come back with,
Would you like me to come back for those 3 areas? That's the understanding I have, cost proposal for those 3 areas? Okay, all right,
okay?
okay, I will do that.
First meeting in September, I questioned the figures, why it says they're down 125, but up 377. I never got a definitive answer on that. That's been like 6 weeks. I wonder, remember those numbers didn't jive?
Yes, yes.
It said we were
I
out
thought we-
125, but
Didn't
up.
we
I
get
never
that from
got.
her?
I never got the
Anne
official.
Marie?
I never got the official. I'll be up or
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, yeah.
That's all part of it.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
So we can have that for the next meeting, please.
Right here, yeah.
Because people are wondering,
Yes,
is our enrollment up?
Right there.
What is it? Is it up or down? Do we know?
down from last year, yeah.
But
That
those figures don't tell us that.
Right,
No.
because, yes, the way she presented it, and I had that explanation,
Yeah.
because I asked her afterwards. And
Yeah, but I never got it.
Yeah, okay, we'll bring it back to you. The 137, it showed, yeah, the difference.
No, it said negative 125.
It did.
but three-
Right.
I've got them right here. It says we
Yeah.
went up 377, but the other sheet says we're down 125, which adds up to over 500 students miscounted somehow. That's from 6 weeks ago. Can I also, I don't know if this is really, I should say, but I wanted to comment on Reading Day. Should that have been under citizens?
Communications.
I should have done
Okay.
it. I'm a little slow, kind of sick. I just wanted to say that I want to commend the administrators and also this reading specialist. About 10 years ago, when I retired, Linda Haxton called me up and asked me if I'd come into Mason. She was a reading specialist. She asked me if I'd come into Mason Road. So I thought, sure, what the heck, one dime. 10 years later in 4 schools, it's wonderful. If you have that opportunity, and they do a wonderful job of coordinating. The kids are so great. I was always secondary, so when you see these 5 and 6, and it's so cute. And everything's such a big deal to them. So I just want to commend your staff for the 4
Thank
schools that
you.
I did visit. Sorry, I didn't hit middle school. Never again. Never
Never
again.
again.
Been there, done that, Mr. Packard. No, it was wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right, that brings us to our student rep, Kaylee, today.
I'm a little stuffy, so if you can't hear me, just let me know.
Join the group.
Yeah, everyone's getting the cold. Don't worry, not contagious.
We're sitting in between them.
Want to change your seat?
All right, so this past week, it was a really big week for sports, actually, as the fall season is coming to a close. Everyone is having their last home games and having their senior nights. Volleyball's senior night is going to be on Monday, and they just won against Wachusett on Friday, and they are the first of our fall sports teams to be qualified for districts, not including cross country. Cross country actually had an invitational this weekend. The girls had placed first in their division, and Rebecca James, she's a senior at Shepherd Hill, and she made a new record for the girls cross country meet. So congrats to Rebecca. Also, in their senior night, girls field hockey, they won 5-0 against Fitchburg, which was awesome. It was one of their first wins, and it was on their senior night, so they had a lot of fun celebrating that. In boys soccer, they had their senior night on Saturday. Who do I have next? I'm sorry. Emery Mullen, she's from Charlton Middle School. They had a cross-country meet. I think it was this week or the last week, and she placed first with a bunch of different schools, and it was boys, it was co-ed, so it was boys and girls, and she placed first place out of I think it was over 90 students were there. And then we also had 4 early action seniors that were accepted into Nichols last week for the early action program that Nichols has, and when they come to Shepherd Hill. On October 16th, the Fall Showcase was held at Shepherd Hill for Dudley-Charlton 8th graders, and with a lot of other schools having their programs in the fall, Shepherd Hill, we used to not have our program in the fall. We used to do it in the spring after the seniors left. So you would have a lot of students debating where they wanted to go, and some would apply to Bay Path, St. John's, Holy Name, without having an actual tour of Shepherd Hill first. And by the time spring came around, they were already had their applications in, and their parents were just like, it's too late. So we heard a lot of students this year in the Hill Telegram. They reported on that students in the 8th grade, they thought it helped with their decision with Bay Path because they had a tour with Bay Path last week. I actually had a brother who went to Shepherd Hill last week to tour, and he was debating between Bay Path and Shepherd Hill. And he was really hard going into Bay Path. He's like, I'm going to go to Bay Path. It's going to be great. And then he went to Shepherd Hill, and he's like, I don't know what I was thinking. So it's really good that we brought it a lot sooner. Also, I forgot to mention in the sports, the cheerleaders this past weekend, JV and varsity both placed first at their invitational. And girls soccer had their senior night and Dig Pink night last night, and they ended up raising so far over $700, the soccer team alone, to the Beth Israel Cancer Foundation. And today we have the boys and girls Charlton and Dudley Middle School soccer teams up at the Hill at 6 and 7 respectively. And we had Jacob Wheeler, who's a senior at Shepherd Hill. There was a math invitational last week. Shepherd Hill actually placed 25 out of 90 teams at WPI. And Jacob Wheeler, he got a $1,000 scholarship to WPI for his high placement at the math team. We also had the unified basketball team. They lost their first game, but it ended up being a win for both teams. If you saw the energy that was in there, you had a bunch of other students who initially did not sign up to be a part of the unified basketball team. They put on a uniform and they jumped right in, and you had almost the whole entire school there, and it was awesome to see everyone's face light up, and you could see both teams have so much fun no matter what the score was. They were just happy to be there, and it was really awesome to see everyone come together. And last week we also had the nicotine addiction seminar on October 17th at Shepherd Hill Regional in the auditorium. It was to inform parents and students about the dangers of nicotine and new e-cigarettes that have been an increasing problem within our school, and not even just Shepherd Hill itself, but I've heard some in the middle schools. It's just a problem, not just in our district, obviously, but in this particular age group that really needs to be taken care of, because when they think of it, they're not thinking of it as a cigarette. We were almost the generation to defeat the use of tobacco. We were very close, and no one was smoking cigarettes anymore, but now this new upcoming e-cigarette, this Juul, came along, and it's like we're falling apart again. So I think that by having the nicotine addiction seminar, it really informs parents, because I don't think a lot of parents knew a lot about what was happening. It was more just in the younger generations, because it wasn't something new. Everyone else, my mom used to tell me, it's just like smoking cigarettes in the bathrooms at school, like openly, back in the day. But yeah, it was a very, very good decision to have that seminar there to inform students and parents about the dangers of that. There's also parent-teacher conferences on November 8th. The quarter will be ending this Friday, the 26th, and grades will be out to students on November 2nd. Also on November 2nd, Student Council has their annual blood drive, which is open to students and faculty to donate some blood. And there is a flu clinic at Dudley Elementary School on October 30th to get some flu shots. And that is all I have for today.
Thank you. Any questions
any
for Kaylee?
questions?
Nice job.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. Okay, that brings us up to new business. Director of Finance and Operations report, Mr. Matthew.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief this evening. The Shepherd Hill cheerleaders received a donation of $920.46 from TVI Inc. for their efforts in the collection of clothing items. The Shepherd Hill Golf Program, not Gold Program, I wish we had one of those, received a donation of $600 from David Halloran. I ask the committee to accept these donations.
So moved. Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you very much. In the committee's packet was the FY19 first quarterly report. As I indicate in my memo, there are no major numbers of concern on paper at this point in the year. However, we have added a number of staff, as the committee is very well aware, and that certainly has stretched our payroll budget to the point where we are, obviously, and again, as the committee is very well aware, using circuit breaker monies to help support that for this year. We also have some pending special ed expenses that are likely to hit our books and become official probably for the next school committee meeting. It's important to remind the school committee and everyone that our financial model, which did not change as part of the override, even though the override was fantastic and successful, we have to remember that the override was an override of survival. It prevented us from laying off and having reductions. It did not provide us with a reduction in our use of excess and deficiency funds, nor did it provide us relief in our use of school choice funds. Our model counts on monies being returned from the expense budget each and every year in amounts sufficient to replenish our E&D funds, which would be utilized in the following year. With so much hitting the books already of unexpected and unknown expenses, we really need to do a very, very careful job of monitoring expenses going forward and trying to ensure that those monies that we count on as part of our budget process are returned to the budget. There's no magic in the formula. It's simply spend a little bit less, and we do a very good job of it in this district. And the building principals, administrators, and head custodians are to be commended in everything that they do. But there is a lot of budgetary pressure this year already. On that happy note, that's all I have for the committee this evening.
Any questions for Mr. Matthew? Okay. That brings us to the Budget and Finance Subcommittee report. Elaine.
So this is the update for the meeting, the meeting that was held on October 10th. So as we laid out the year, our first objective was to focus on capital planning. So what we're looking to do is to create a long-term plan that will allow the district and towns to plan for capital expenditures. And currently what we're discussing are the district needs according to high priority, short-range objectives, and long-term planning. So previously, capital expenditures have been addressed on a year-to-year approach. So looking to arrange for a long-term plan is the focus of the committee right now. So in 2016, there was a study of Shepherd Hill done as part of an attempt to help redefine our SOI applications for MSBA. There was a history of the SOI applications for Shepherd Hill compiled. So the first one was applied for in 2006, and with the exception of skipping the year 2007, we've consistently had an SOI application into MSBA. There was, in 2011, we qualified for the Green Repair Program, so we did windows and doors at that point in time, but we've historically have applied for MSBA reimbursement or approval for renovations to Shepherd Hill. As a committee, we've discussed the need to address high-priority needs that are large expense, considering the option of seeking MSBA reimbursement or seeking funding through the two towns as a debt exclusion. 2019 will be the final year of the debt exclusion for both CMS and Charlton Middle School and Dudley Middle School buildings. We've considered the possibility of moving towards proposing these large repairs at Springtown meeting, in essence maintaining the same debt exclusion impact to taxpayers while moving forward with much-needed repairs. This was been part of the discussion for the past 2 years, and it was something that we discussed as we were considering the override amount. Approval of capital projects to any buildings require a district-wide vote, which must occur on the same day, and the cost of any projects are borne by the town where the building is located. The two approaches being discussed right now are approach number one, which we are identifying the roofs at Shepherd Hill, Dudley Middle, Charlton Middle as high priority, and propose seed money to hire a firm to complete a comprehensive long-range plan. So we've previously discussed what we call a house doctor, looking at our buildings and facilities. The second approach would be to hire a firm to do a partial review to identify initial projects to bring forward in the spring, with the money for hiring that firm coming from our contingency funds, and then add additional funds to, or seek additional funds to have the firm complete the long-range comprehensive plan. Right now, Mr. Matthews identified the top 3 priorities as the roof at Shepherd Hill, which is currently out of warranty, the bleachers at Shepherd Hill, because the rental fee that we've been paying since the field was done has now exceeded the cost of permanent bleachers, and money for a full comprehensive study of our facilities to help design a long-range capital funding plan. We also looked at the regional agreement. The recommendation is that regional agreements should be reviewed every 5 years. The last time the Dudley-Charlton agreement was amended was in 1989. So we've asked Dr. Nash to contact DESI to seek their assistance in reviewing the agreement. It was determined in reviewing the agreement that the following buildings are actually owned by the towns. The district owns Shepherd Hill, Dudley Middle, Charlton Middle, and Heritage. We lease Charlton Elementary School from the town of Charlton, and we lease Mason Road School and Dudley Elementary School, which was formerly the Dudley Junior High School, from the town of Dudley. The leases lapsed several years ago, and we've asked Dr. Nash and Mr. Matthew to drop new leases and get us back in sync with both towns on that. The next item we talked about is upcoming contract negotiations. So we're working with Dr. Nash and Mr. Matthew to begin looking at the fiscal impact of negotiations for, we have wage and benefit and DCTA coming up this year. And we also have been looking at tuition waived and school choice students. We are looking to answer questions raised as to how these students are coded and counted, and the potential tax liability for out-of-district students of employees. It was information that came up that possibly is a taxable benefit to the employee, so we're looking to clarify that. And our next meeting's on November 14th.
Thank you. Any questions?
I'd just like to add a little bit further on what Mrs. Rabbit said. The discussion did come up about the debt exclusion coming off the books in the spring of 2019, and the discussion was whether to try and take that money, voted and use it towards the next time. And I was in the minority. I thought that should not happen. I think the people should be given a break just because the schools are paid for. I don't think we should jump on, figure they're going to endorse something else. So I thought that should be brought to the full committee to see whether to proceed with that, because there was only one person who thought that. I thought the committee should either take a vote on that or just put on the agenda for next meeting, because it would affect our planning. How we do, if you think we're going to try and apply for something in the spring, are we going to let the debt exclusion that go away for a year or two and then maybe come back in a year or two? So basically, I thought that should be brought to the full committee, whether tonight or at a future date.
I think maybe we'll bring it up, give everyone a chance to
understand?
think about it, and we'll bring it up at our next meeting. And that means give the town a break, because the schools will be paid, and
Do you understand what that meant?
that
The
will
debt exclusion,
end,
the
that
payment to
part
the
of-
schools.
in your taxes will
The
be
schools will be
lowered.
paid off in the spring, so the talk was, well, since people are already paying that money on the debt exclusion, maybe they won't mind revoting it
If
to be
we
used for
go
something else. which
for
I think
another
people-
debt
I think people would mind at this point, so I thought it should be voted by the full committee, maybe at another meeting, put on the agenda.
Can I bring some additional information to the committee? And Mrs. Cabala did bring this up at the meeting, and we did discuss it. I don't know that I don't think that we're ready to make a recommendation one way or the other. And I know that Mr. Matthews has been working on information, but information that's important for you to be aware is that none of the three roofs that are in bad condition right now are going to be eligible for MSBA reimbursement. So the MSBA was requiring a roof to be 20 years old before you could submit for MSBA reimbursement. They have now moved that to 25 years. Shepherd Hill's roof is 21 years old. We can't apply for funding for that for 3 years. Charlton Middle School and Dudley Middle School roofs are 18 years old, so we can't apply for 6 years. All of the roofs are in a situation that they need to be addressed. And I know Mr. Matthew specifically said Shepherd Hill. I know that just in touring the buildings, Charlton Middle School roof is in very dire condition. So I think, Mr. Matthew, if you can provide numbers, I think we were looking at $2 million, approximately $2+ million to do the Shepherd Hill roof. And he's seeking information regarding that. There's been the company that did the study with Shepherd Hill coming back. So you're substantially looking at, I'm going to guess somewhere in the tune of $5 to $6 million for 3 roofs that are going to need to be addressed in a situation that we're not going to be able to get reimbursement. They're going to have to be sought through the towns.
And Mr. Matthew also mentioned about that ceiling. You want to explain what that ceiling thing they have?
It was a process that would restore the roof, not replace it. So we wouldn't be tearing down to bare wood or bare structure. We'd simply be putting coatings on top of the roofs that would carry with them a multi-year warranty. That's one of the options for repairs to the roofs.
Didn't you say the middle schools were so bad they couldn't do that, or was something like that?
Based on the type of material that was used for the roof construction almost 20 years ago, it was, I think I mentioned this to the committee before, but it was rated as one of the worst roofs that you could possibly have.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is that the materials are super, super thin, and it was like a space age type material that was supposed to be great, but the manufacturer made a mistake someplace along the way, so the materials themselves were nowhere near as solid as they were thought to have been when the roofs were initially installed, and I believe the manufacturer is subsequently out of business for a number of years now, even though, again, this was only less than 20 years ago. So that the possibility of restoring the 3 roofs and buying time is one of the things that we're certainly taking a look at. To protect the building infrastructure seems to make a lot of sense. Hopefully the costs would come in so that we could, again, if it was the committee's desire, replace the existing debt at about the same level over the next 3 years, take care of the roofs and get that seed money for a further study, and then after that 3-year period, then again go back to the towns, trying to keep the debt level about the same and do the next level of projects that are required, particularly at Shepherd Hill and Heritage, are 2 not oldest buildings, but 2 buildings with the largest dollar value of repairs necessary.
That means you want to go for a debt exclusion.
Well,
I know it'd be the same, but it's a debt exclusion.
That certainly is the committee's decision.
So the taxpayers do not get a breather. They'll be paying the same, but if they get a breather, then it goes down, because our schools are paid in the spring. I just want to make that clear so everybody understands that.
And just so I'm clear, I'm not recommending that we hit the taxpayers next year necessarily. I'm simply pointing out the priority necessary for fixing the infrastructure to prevent further deterioration as quickly as possible.
Plus, it's not a given that the people would vote for it anyway, so we can't count on it till the vote is done,
Exactly.
even though, I think it's a swash.
I think what we've uncovered is that there's a lot of analysis that needs to be done in information gathering, which is what Mr. Matthews is doing right now. And just updating you as to the conversation that we've had. But no decisions have been made, and I'm not bringing forth any recommendations from the committee.
Okay, any other questions for Elaine? Okay. That brings us up to F20, budget planning, school committee's directive, and
Right.
Dr. Nash will
Yes.
speak to that.
Thank you. As you know, we're about to embark upon the FY20 budget planning process. And as such, I wanted to have a preliminary discussion this evening with the school committee members for the purpose of you hopefully voting to give us, the administrative team, a directive as to the type or types of budget that you would like us to prepare for you. The sheet that I presented this evening that you have in your packet outlines 2 potential types of budgets that I am recommending, given our knowledge at this point about our financial outlook for next year. These would be the 2 types of budgets that I would suggest to the committee you would ask us to prepare. We can prepare both of them, we can prepare one of them, or we can prepare any option that the committee would like us to prepare. The first budget is a level services budget. I'm sure that the committee is well aware of what a level services budget includes, but again, I wanted to make sure that for those who are watching, that you understand that when we talk about a level services budget, that is a budget that represents an increase, because that budget would take into account how we maintain our current level of services. That would include personnel, programs, and all of the services that we deliver to students. And it would include increases. Potentially, those increases would come in a number of areas. Those would be increases that you know of with respect to transportation contracts that have been negotiated, and thus you know. Certainly, cost increases in health insurance and benefits, any contractual obligations that you have negotiated would be included in that, and any increases in sped costs. In particular, what we know as we are building a budget, generally around February and March, could be very different than what happens, unfortunately, at the end of the year. So what we would know about out-of-district tuitions and expectations with respect to students and personnel, anything related to IEPs that would impact the budget because of changes in programming or personnels, and certainly any new programs in SPED, particularly around substantially separate programs that we would develop or recommend that we implement, with the sense that down the road, they potentially would allow us to take some students who are out of district and bring them back in district because we have a particular program that didn't exist before, or because we need to address students coming up, in the pipeline that we've identified early on. So primarily, a level services budget is always, any district I've ever been in, it's always an increased budget. Sometimes people think that it's similar to level funded. That's a reduction budget, as you well know. Those of you who've been on the committee for a long time know that. Level services budget, it does not address new programs, except for those identified generally in SPED and those that have been mandated or that we believe we should have in special ed. It does not necessarily deal with new staffing. It may, however, look at some reorganization of existing personnel for more effective delivery services, for cost efficiency, or for efficiency of operations. So while you may not have people in the same position, a level services budget, some recommendations that may come forward from the administrative team would be to take staff they currently have and to maybe use them differently. And you may see that, from central office all the way down through the buildings and with each principal. The other type of budget that I would suggest to the committee that you may wish us to explore is an additional needs budget, and I call this for personnel only, and in two key areas, if the committee so chooses. One area would be class size, so where the administrative team and I feel that we need to address class size. You certainly have spoke very clearly on class sizes at the elementary level and trying to keep those at what we would consider to be an optimum class size for teaching and learning. The other area that I would suggest that we might want to look at for personnel would be around safety issues. And when I talk about safety, it could be, for example, a recommendation that we need another nurse in the district where it's difficult for us to, with a lot of medically fragile children, for us to ensure that with the nurses we have, when one is out, how do we maintain that coverage when we can't get a substitute? Or it could be in an area where you feel that you're understaffed in facilities and the cleanliness of a building might be a risk for a safety concern. So those are kind of the areas when I say safety. I'm still talking personnel. I'm not talking about programs. So those are the two budgets based on the knowledge that I have at this point and discussions with Mr. Matthew with respect to where we see FY20. You heard him mention somewhat broadly that we have certainly some pressure points in our budget this year. Those will probably not go away. Those will be costs that we'll be pushing forward. And so it's important for us, certainly, while we may wish to build, and initially, I think I sent out to the administrative team 3 types of budgets. They will tell you that for purposes of discussion, we needed to take off the educationally sound budget, simply because, while we can do that, and we can add that third column and tell you that the reality of us being able to implement that, other than through reorganizations of some sort in personnel, would probably not be something we could accomplish next year, at least in FY20. So So I'm really looking for the committee to take some kind of a vote for a directive so we can begin our process in earnest in November and December before we get it to
Do
you.
you have a recommendation?
My recommendation is that we do both. I think we can do both. If you want some other areas under additional needs, and anything else, we could do that. It's just as easy for us to add on and show you what the cost would be, by each building and by the recommendations that the administrative team may have as they meet with us and then certainly meet with you, so.
I think that's a good idea, to do both.
Is any other area you would like me to look at under additional needs personnel, but just know that we won't be addressing adding new programs unless they are special ed, and we believe that by adding that program, we have the potential down the road to bring some students in, or we can deconstruct one program and add another one because we need to do that because students are moving up. So that would be our thing.
Okay, so we'll need a motion to give Dr. Nash and Mr. Matthew a directive on how we are going to start our budget. And she did recommend we should do both. So do I have a motion?
I have a motion, I make a motion to direct Dr. Nash to do both types of budgets.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. So we'll move it up.
I appreciate that, thank you.
So it's the superintendent search process update next. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't
I'm
catch
sorry,
it
I
initially.
could have, I didn't
Oh, no, there's no reason you would.
recognize.
Thanks for coming, Tracy.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad to.
So just to give you an update on where the search committee stands right now. On Monday, October 15th, the district website went live with a link. The link contained 2 items. So the first is that we're soliciting community feedback by a survey monkey regarding the qualities that they are seeking in the next superintendent, so that we'll be using that information as we move through the process. Additionally, we have posted an online application for individuals interested in serving on the superintendent search committee. The application period for the search committee is open until October 29th, and the survey monkey for community feedback is open until November 3rd. So regarding the online applications for the search committee, just as a reminder to the public, we're looking for 11 members to join Mrs. Carmignani and I on the search committee. We're seeking 2 parents, 1 from each town, 3 teachers, 1 principal, 1 member of the DCTA, 1 central office staff, 1 municipal government representative, 1 student rep, and 1 individual representing special education. To date, we've received 45 individuals have completed the Survey Monkey questions. I believe there's 5 questions. It's
Yes.
not a long survey, it's actually quite short. And we've received 32 applications. So while we've received a good number of applications to date, we are interested in seeking to have a balanced committee representing both towns in all grades, so I would continue to ask people to apply for the search committee. We did outline what the obligation and commitment would be. And I would ask Dr. Nash and/or the principals to resend an email to encourage further participation in both the survey and the search committee. On that Monday, through social media, posts were also requested from Charlton Happenings, the Charlton PTO, Dudley PTO, and the Dudley-Charlton CPAC to post the link to the district website and the information. On Tuesday, Tracy had prepared press releases for us, and press releases were sent to the Telegram and Gazette, the Charlton Villager, and the Citizens Chronicle about both the survey and the online applications. And Dr. Nash sent out an email to all staff and families. So updating other topics related to the search. So our timeline is to post the position on November 1st. In doing that, one of the things that I'm looking for, and I'm going to pass out tonight, Tracy provided some information regarding superintendent candidate qualities that will help guide the search committee to find a candidate that we're looking for. I'm going to pass this along. Because it's time sensitive, I'm going to ask you to stay after class and do some homework. It's very simple. It's very simple. It's just a rating scale. There's 20 qualities on here. It's a rating scale of 1 to 5, whether or not it's not important to you at all or it's very important. So what I'm looking for you to do is to provide feedback on those particular items, and then go back and circle the 8 qualities that are of most importance to you. If there's not something there that you find important, we did leave space for you to fill that out. But I do need that tonight because Tracy and I, between today and the end of the month, we need to complete the job description and create the district profile so that we can be ready to publicize on the 1st. So the other question that I have, that I did not put on that I'm looking kind of for verbal feedback from people tonight is understanding that we are looking for someone who has the credentials and the licensure to be a superintendent. I would like the committee's feedback on what level of education you're looking for. So if you're looking for someone who has gone to a master's level, a doctorate level, is question number 1. The next question that I ask is is there a specific type of experience that you're looking for the candidate to have? And if it's of importance to you, the number of years that you're looking for experience. So if you're looking for someone to have administrative experience, not necessarily at a superintendent level, but you're looking for someone to have administrative experience of, 3 to 5 years, I need that information to frame the job description beyond the qualities. So if I can open that up to discussion tonight, because that's something I do need some feedback on.
I'd say administrative experience of at least 5 years.
Is everybody in agreement with at least 5 years' experience?
Administration, not necessarily superintendent, just administration.
Can I ask a question to Tracy? Okay. Tracy, what is the typical central office years of experience that people have asked for?
It varies because it depends on whether it is really related to whether you're looking for someone or consider it an advantage to have someone who is newer, who may be considering this for their first position as a superintendent. Okay. There are some districts that want to sort of rule that out of hand. So if you're doing that, then you necessarily are going to be putting more years. One of I was going to actually ask that in relation to the proposal. You may want to consider whether you want to specify central administration experience versus just administrative experience. That sometimes is a distinction that committees want to make.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions?
So I'm going to ask the first question that I think is the easiest one to ask. Do you want to go up to a master's level or a doctorate level? Or are you, you have to have a master's level to be in education, so we know that that's kind of a given, but are you looking for anything beyond a master's level?
It could be preferred, but I don't think it's mandatory to be a doctorate. Maybe preferred as opposed to etched in stone, because there's a lot of good people that just never got their PhD or EDD.
Does that?
That's fine. That language is not uncommon.
Pretty standard.
So as far as, does everyone have an opinion regarding the recommendation for central administrative experience, or qualifying the term administrative experience? Because I'm not sure if in some districts of greater or larger size, there could be something between what we have, which is central office administration and building administration, and other districts of very large administration could go down other tiers. So I don't know whether or not you want to put a qualification on administration.
I don't think it's necessary for central office. Our last 3 have been principals, and they did a fantastic job. So I think in searching through, you may read those out when you get them, but I would say just administrative experience. some people don't have the opportunity because they don't have positions in their system. You know, like if there's no assistant superintendent, how could they have experience? Things like
Okay.
that.
Couldn't you also put preferred central
Yeah.
office experience on that part?
It's whatever the committee wants.
But you're
You
part of the
need
committee too.
you need to guide us to go into the committee, because if you're going to ask us to read out applications because someone hasn't reached a certain level, I need to know what certain level is your foundation. Because I can leave it administrative experience, but unless you tell us that, you know,
You want to narrow it down.
we're gonna go into the committee, and we can't qualify or screen out applications if they have administrative experience, and we didn't put a level. I mean, you could,
I think
I don't know.
administrative experience, I would say, I would just go with that.
I think that I'm worried about weeding out like a very dynamic educator who didn't happen to have that experience yet if we say central office experience. So maybe if we say just administrative experience, you know, we can kind of determine from there.
Okay.
Once we look at the other qualities.
Okay. So then the quality piece is gonna come really important when we get to that homework
There you go.
assignment.
I'm already working on my homework.
Okay,
I like it.
all right. So, those are the outstanding questions to the credentials or qualities that we're looking for. I don't know that you need me necessarily to read this, okay, but I think it's pretty simple. If you can fill that out for us and let us know, then that will help guide us. So, so as I mentioned, with Tracy, Mrs. Camignani, you're going to be involved in this process of job description and district profile. And I'll also ask for Dr. Nash's input, as well as having been on the circuit. She might give some insight to things that trip or trigger someone's interest in applying for a job. And then I'm gonna let Tracy talk about moving forward, because she's working right now on coordinating focus groups.
Right. So, at the same time that the survey is out in the field, and then extending somewhat past that, in order to inform first the search committee and then eventually to inform you in your final decision, I'll be conducting focus groups in the district. Generally, that involves meeting essentially with all of the various groups of stakeholders. Right now, we're setting up a session with the students, probably the student government at Shepherd Hill. I have a meeting scheduled with the secondary principals for Monday morning. And then we'll simply go through, I'll be meeting with central office staff, I'll be meeting with the various teachers in the district, and we'll have at least 2 public sessions, which I will ask for your assistance in publicizing once we get the dates, 1 in each of the towns. And those will be open to the public. I will warn you in advance that depending on the time of year and depending on the night, those are often not packed. You should not find that discouraging. You should find it a reason to push the survey, because that's another way that people can give input that sometimes they find more convenient. And because we've done a slightly unusual survey in that we've actually given them as open-ended questions rather than made them multiple choice, you're getting sort of a wide range of feedback. As you already heard, there's 45 answers so far, and the vast majority of them are parents. So if we can try to encourage the rest of the community to respond at this point, I think that would also be useful. But I am, you have my contact information, or if you don't, please let me know, because I am your field rep out here in any case. So as we go through this, as you have questions, you should feel free to get in touch with me.
We set a deadline of November 3rd or 2nd for that survey to be completed. Is it possible to extend that kind of deadline, just so that we can get as many people to respond as possible?
And that's not even, honestly, that's not even unusual. I think what I do, I'll certainly check in with Elaine as we're making these decisions, but is to essentially gauge that. If it seems as though you can actually tell from the responses when not only when it initially goes out, but when there are reminders or those kinds of things, because it jumps. So, any help that any of you can give on that is useful. But we can certainly, there's no reason it has to close on the 3rd. If we were using it to inform the posting, we would need it to close. But since we're not, we're using it to inform the search committee, we can leave it open longer.
I think I appreciate that question, because I think that would be a good thing. We initially closed it early because we weren't sure when we were going to be doing orientation with the search committee. But now that that's towards the end of the month, that we could extend the survey longer. I did attempt, and I looked at going to both the Charlton Board of Selectmen and the Dudley Board of Selectmen to do it during Citizens Forum to also reach a different kind of audience. Dudley doesn't meet until the end of the month. Charlton, when I went to Charlton Town Hall, it was a special meeting, so it wasn't an open session. So if we push it out, then we could attempt to hit both of the Board of Selectmen meetings, and again, get it in that public forum, and also hopefully drive some more municipal input, as well as, trying to reach out to organizations, so. We have a town meeting in Dudley on Monday.
Okay.
So maybe it's something that I could ask, or if any information can be distributed at that point.
The paper surveys that you had, maybe is it at Dudley Middle School?
No, it's at Shepherd Hill.
It's at Shepherd Hill, then maybe even if we could just have some signage up there with surveys available for people to pick, might be.
Could ask the town moderator what he thinks.
I already added it into my opening remarks.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Moderator.
That's useful.
So, you just, in reference to the applications that we've received from the search committee right now, there's a lot of interest at the elementary level. But we're looking to, recommendations when we sat down with Glenn and Tracy was to make sure that we had representation at elementary, middle, and high school. So that's why I'm continuing to ask that we have, maybe we can find somebody that has, kids in multiple buildings would be great. But right now, a lot of what I'm seeing initially coming in are people that are in elementary. I want to make sure that we're
For the
spread
whole
out.
committee, I would like them to have access to the surveys and access to the applicants of the search committee. So they'll be involved in that. I mean, they're not choosing, but they should have a right to.
The survey, Tracy, that's being done by MASC. So when the survey closes, they'll compile all of that data and then present it.
We'll
to
report
us.
it back to you.
And then I know Kelly Frederico can give you access to the applicants for the search committee. So they can't.
So, again, let me ask this question. They can have access to the search committee, but unless we post a whole meeting of everybody coming in, it's just you and I that are scheduled to
Yes.
meet to review that.
Right.
Agreed.
But they should have the right to see who applied. I think you're good with that. Would you like to?
Sure, doesn't hurt. We might know something about someone, like this person's got a good background, you know what I mean? We might be able to give a little help on somebody.
Right.
There's a lot of planning board meetings going on in Charlton right now. There's some very heated topics that are bringing a lot of people out. And so the town planner or the town administrator may be willing to just kind of put this information out there, because you'll have a large audience of people. Granted, they're there for a specific reason, but they'll be there maybe to hear what you're saying too about the survey.
I don't,
want me to do that?
I appreciate it. I don't know if that's the appropriate forum that I want to go into with that.
It's just reaching
but-
another audience.
I mean, the information can be put at town halls, it can be put at town libraries. Kathy did prepare a manual version of the survey so that we can get it in places. We just, finishing up on all of that. So.
Also, town administrators can have an email distribution list that residents can sign up in. I don't know if Dudley has that or not. I don't think Charlton has it, but.
We could also put it on cable, that hasn't been done yet.
That's a good idea.
You just wanted to reach a different population. I was trying to get you into the town, the municipal government.
You're welcome to go.
I wasn't saying I wanted to go. I thought.
Well, quite honestly, this is a lot of work. So someone taking 15 minutes to go do something, there's a lot of work in writing that has to be done right now. So it's a lot. So if you wanted to take that on, I'd appreciate it. But just as a follow-up, Mrs. O'Coin and I are meeting on the 31st to determine the members of the search committee, at which point in time I'll contact the individuals selected. And the orientation meeting of the search committee will be held at the district office on Wednesday, November 28th at 6:30. Unless anybody has any questions, I think that's everything that I had.
Any questions? Thank you, Elaine, for the good job you're doing.
Thanks Tracy for
You're
coming.
welcome. Absolutely. And as I said, if you think of other things, any of you should feel free to get in touch.
Now we will do the MCAS, the elementary principals first.
So Kathleen and I are here to talk about the elementary schools and our performance on the MCAS. Just kind of tell you our areas to celebrate and our areas to concentrate and our innovations. So for both of us, we both have some good news. We have some great news. For Dudley Elementary, I'm happy to say that we actually are meeting our targets. So that was a real nice thing to know that we've been able to reach. Our progress towards our improvement targets was at 76%, so our classification is not requiring assistance or intervention. I believe that's true for all of our schools, so that's good news. For our indicators on looking at our progress towards improvement targets, some of the areas that we can celebrate for Dudley Elementary School is that our growth targets were 3 out of 4 points for ELA and 4 out of 4 points for math for all students. I think we can also celebrate that our growth for math was 3 out of 4 points for our lowest performing students. And ELA and math for our lowest performing students, it was 4 out of 4. For achievement was 4 out of 4 points in both ELA and math. So our economically disadvantaged, our high needs subgroups, our growth scores indicated 4 out of 4 points for math as well. We were meeting or exceeding expectations. Our percentage was above the state averages in ELA, reading, and math for both grades 3 and 4. So those are all our areas to celebrate. As far as concentrating, we definitely need to concentrate on our high needs students and our students with disabilities. That just, the next page just shows you that all those areas, that we have 37% to 45% in the exceeding or meeting categories for each of the grades and each of the subjects. So that is definitely an area that we want to concentrate. Innovating and intervening. A lot of the areas Ms. Pastore and I are sharing, so I'll go over those. For Dudley Elementary, though, we've got the implementation of a phonology response to intervention going on for grades 2 through 4. We are implementing a writing prompt benchmark and a rubric for fall and spring for grades 2 through 4. Kathleen and I both have the technology integration specialist who is implementing the co-teaching within the classrooms and able to provide academic choice for our students. We both had the addition of a 0.6 guidance counselor to provide additional social emotional supports to all students. For Dudley Elementary School, we have the addition of a 0.6 Title I teacher to provide additional response to intervention supports for all of our students. We have math response to intervention groups are being created to focus on skill gaps as identified through our STAR assessment benchmarks. And we have the reading and creation teams are designing integrated units of instruction that are enhancing the content area of reading and strengthening writing.
So I would like to hit on the highlights of Heritage School, and as I'm looking at the first page, I actually have an error. So we are at 63%, so that's partially meeting targets. It shouldn't say that we are meeting targets, we're partially meeting targets. You have to have a 75% rate to be meeting your targets. So again, the district is in that not requiring assistance or intervention, because as a district, we are still partially meeting targets. What I did want to highlight on this first page is that the economically disadvantaged, who is a portion of our high needs population, we seem to be doing a nice steady job with that population. For our economically disadvantaged, we're at 91% meeting targets. So as part of that high needs group, we are working in the right direction for our economically disadvantaged. And we do have some growth scores. So I do know that across the state, English language arts in grade 4 math in grade 4 and English language arts took a little bit of a dip, but in our growth scores for English language arts, for those lowest performing groups of students, our economically disadvantaged and high need subgroups, we did earn the 4 out of 4 points for English language arts. And at Heritage School, we earned 4 out of 4 points for chronic absenteeism, which means that we're reaching that 95% attendance rate or above for both the all students group and our lowest performing students. In things to concentrate on, again, our high needs population includes students who are students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged, and we did not at Heritage School have a large enough percentage of ELL students that's typically in that high needs group as well. We do not, so that was just those 2 categories. So you can see we're still looking to make some strides in those 2 groups. Again, the economically disadvantaged seem to be a strength, but still looking to work with our students with disabilities and make some gains with our students with special needs. At Heritage School, in addition to the things that we are doing on both sides of the district, again, RTI block was something that was a goal of the district plan, so all schools have implemented a response to intervention block. At Heritage School, it's 25-minute block where students can both get support and scaffolding if they're a student that needs extra support, and then students that really need a challenge, that gives them that opportunity as well to use that time to their advantage. We are also working, and I know Dudley Elementary, this is a shared goal, working on growth mindset. So many of our 4th grade math teachers are using some research out of Stanford University's mathematical teaching resources about growing that growth mindset with our students, specifically in math class. And we have right now 87% of our students in grade 4 who have special education math support, so who have an individualized education program in math. 87% of them are having their instruction, receiving their special ed support in a push-in model rather than a pull-out, so they're receiving their content with the support of the special ed teacher in their math class. Mrs. Allen reported that her special education team cross-district is going to be looking very closely at our special education population, again, looking at co-teaching and inclusive practice models, looking at restructuring methods of delivery of services for students who are on IEPs, increasing RTI supports for our special education students, and looking at our curriculum, at our materials that we're using to teach our students with special needs. And cross-district, through the great efforts of Mrs. Aris, we are all going forward with project-based learning, and knowing that in project-based learning, we can only hope to accentuate some of the math and ELA skills that will be an integral piece of project-based learning. So, if anyone had any questions, or?
Can you just give me the definition for high needs?
High needs include students in the special needs, economically disadvantaged, and ELL students.
Okay.
So it's basically all the groups that are put together. Mm-hmm.
How many of our students with special needs are like, where our students with disabilities are also part of that economically disadvantaged subgroup?
Well, they would, I don't know the exact number to tell you
Okay.
on that, but
I don't expect
all of them would be included in the high needs group, though.
But they'd all be in that category of high needs, but we do have some students who might be students with who would be in the economically disadvantaged categories, as well as students with disabilities categories. They might be in both categories. Right,
Actually, I think they could be in all three.
could be.
How's RTI, I'm sorry, through the chair. How is RTI explained to the students at this level?
So I think at the elementary level, and I don't want to speak for Diane, but I think elementary teachers by nature, that's what we do, is you have 25 individual students, you have 25 individual levels in your classroom. And for most of our elementary teachers, teaching groupings is something that they do every single day in math and reading. We have the structured RTI block this year to formally designate that this is a block of time that, in addition to what you might do in your reading or math group, we can look at our STAR assessments. We can group kids cross classroom, so we might have a pod of 4 teachers who are partnering and saying, okay, of our 4 classrooms, who are the kids that really need some work with reading fluency? And during this RTI block, who are the students that really need some work on vocabulary? And who are some students who are reading above grade level? And we can challenge them and have them be in a literature circle group and work more independently, so we're meeting their needs as well. So in addition to, I think, to what teachers do every day at the elementary levels with groupings, this just gives us a more defined amount and structured piece of time to work on those skills as well.
The RTI groups are also very fluid, so they're changing constantly. Children's move in and out of the RTI groups. For instance, in our school in the math, as I said, we are focusing on the skill gaps. So a child may not need numeration or estimating. So they're not going to be pooled just all the time with the same groups of kids. So they're floating in and out of the groups. So the kids actually.
That's helpful.
And as a matter of fact, some of our interventionists might also, like our .6 Title I person, she may actually be working with some of the highest kids because she's only there 3 days a week, but the teacher may be working with the lower kids, which we do that a lot. Our teachers work with their own students.
That's great, thank you.
Questions?
Thank you. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Middle school next.
Good evening, everyone. I drew the straw first, so I'm going to take the opportunity. Mr. Stachewski, thank you. So first and foremost, good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about Charlton Middle School's 2018 MCAS testing process. This is my 9th rodeo at delivering this message to school committee, and it's been a really fun ride over 9 years. I look at the trajectory that we've had. It's always headed in an upward tick. In 2018, we did run into a little bit of a snafu. We had a couple steps backwards in most of our target areas. And I found it interesting, and I look at this more as an opportunity more than anything else, because with a new test, with a new next generation standard test coming into play, and us getting ready for making sure that we can meet the needs of all that testing, it was unique how it all played out for us. So I'm not saying that we don't have a lot to celebrate. We have multiple areas to celebrate across all areas, starting with ELA. All of our students in grades 5, 6, 7, and 8 did fall into a category where we were ahead of state standards. So we were definitely in a good area. In our mathematics, we stayed stable and went down in multiple areas, but not enough that it's going to be something that's going to be recognized as a major concern item, but an area that we can actually refocus on and really re-gauge ourselves and make sure that we have room for improvement. Science and technology, we're still ahead of the state averages in many areas. We have a high CPI. In 5th grade, we had a 85.2, I believe, CPI across the board. In our overall category of all students, we were up over a 90 in one subcategory. So we're definitely making some good progress there. With the project-based learning and everything that's there, we're going to definitely be heading in the right direction. Now, areas to concentrate and move upon. We look at this each year the same way. We do have to focus on moving our students from the categories of where they're at right now, whether they're at partially meeting expectations, or if they're not meeting, we have a percentage of students that we do need to target to move up. But another focus point for us will be moving our kids into the advanced category, and it's something that we look at each year. And to move those students, it doesn't take a lot of momentum or a lot of change within the current existing practices that we have. So I know that we can target and get where we need to be. Another area that we have to concentrate on is our writing sustainability on a computer-based platform. One of the things with the computer-based testing has come into play this year. The students are there to sit in front of a computer for a prolonged period of time and type away, and that sustainability is important because we're migrating from a paper-based test to a computer-based test. And if the students don't have an opportunity to work in that capacity all the time, it does become somewhat of a challenge. But it's definitely something that we will be looking at to make sure that we improve upon. Other than that, things we're going to do moving into next year, as was stated by our elementary principals, we do have a project-based learning initiative that's going to overlap multiple curriculum areas. This is based on inquiry-based learning. This is going to allow children to be able to attack situations and learning and analyze and synthesize data and apply the knowledge to the curriculum that they're in right now. We are going back to a standard. A couple of years ago, we had Study Island, and we used it for an RTI block, and it really paid great dividends. As we were going from the legacy to the next generation standard test over the last 2 years, we've gotten away from that RTI block. We're going to reinstate that moving forward, and I think that's going to give an opportunity not only for our lower level learners, but our middle level learners, as well as challenge our middle to upper level learners to get to the next level in advanced category. At the same time, we're looking at redesigning our school-wide special education services with an emphasis on the delivery of instruction by subject-specific teachers. More importantly, look towards a push-in model instead of the pull-out model, therefore connecting every student with a subject-specific teacher, and move the special education teacher to overseeing the reteaching, the modifications, and accommodations as needed so every child can be successful within a regular classroom setting. We are also in the process right now of doing a data collection portal with every benchmark piece of evidence and data that will support the learning in the classroom, so we have real-time knowledge of where children stand, and then be able to intervene as needed each quarter, and through a fluid motion, through a fluid opportunity, be able to move kids in and out of groups, either supporting them at a lower level or helping to move them to a higher level. We're going to review our existing programs that we have, our personnel, our current scheduling model to meet the needs that we're going to be able to utilize for the ever-changing needs of the middle schools, academically, emotionally, and socially, as this will have a direct impact on the overall learning and achievement. We're additionally going to be continuing with our Google platform to be able to allow children to access information through a computer program for type responses, open response questioning. It's just the way that we're heading, and it's important that we continue to move there. We're also going to integrate as many computer assessments as possible to help simulate the testing process for children. Our main focus, however, with all this being said, is that we're still going to work on creating meaningful relationships with every child that walks into our building. We're committed to creating an equal opportunity for every learner, whether it's special education, whether it's economically challenged, a high-needs population, it doesn't matter. Every child has the right to learn at the highest level. And continue to research instructional methodologies that engage, inspire, and challenge all students. Thank you. Any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
I think the RTI is a great idea.
Yep.
But I do know that the middle school schedules are really full already. How are you going to integrate RTI into that already full schedule?
We are looking to utilize our exploratory blocks that we have existing at this point in time. We do have opportunity for some fluidity within the schedule for staff to be able to get some small groups of students to be able to really focus on individual needs. That will be happening as we move into the second quarter. We've taken the whole first quarter to get as many data points as possible to recognize where each and every student in the school is. Not only, and we're talking even from the sub-separate group all the way up, so every student would have an opportunity to be able to be engaged in some sort of RTI operation. So we will be able to get it in 2 days out of a 6-day cycle we're hoping for, minimal for everybody.
So it's going to take the place of exploratories?
It's going to be done within the exploratory block.
I see. Okay. And you also said that you're reviewing existing programs like Envision and Holt. Are you considering other programs instead, or are you just starting
We're looking
with
at
that?
math in general as a whole curriculum, and we come together as curriculum-based groups once a month during our faculty meeting time. We talk about it, and we look at how we can piece together what we need to do. It's a spiraling curriculum. There are lots of opportunities for improvement. We look at math as a language, as a vocabulary, just to bring that language to all students, have common language, so as they transition from grade to grade to grade, grade, they have an understanding of what is expected of them to know moving forward.
And then just a general concern that I have, not just with the middle schools, but in general. You had mentioned that you're planning on giving the kids more opportunities to type and to have opportunities to practice doing testing and so forth. And in general, I've always had the concern that we focus so much time on testing and preparing kids to test versus teaching and the enjoyment of learning.
Yep.
So that's just an overall concern that I have, and I know that when you're looking at the program in general and your scheduling, you'll take a look at things to make sure that we're not just focusing on that.
Absolutely. Good teaching practice, good strong programs, great relationships with teachers and students. I think that pays dividends for the overall learning and growth that takes place. So that will be looked at. I see this as an opportunity for us. This is the first year that test has come through. I'll tell you right now, with just a few things that we're going to do, I know for a fact that we're going to be in a great place next year. I mean, it's just the way I look at it. My staff is ready to look. We have our instructional-based teams breaking down the data every day, and it's an opportunity. It truly is. Thank you. I appreciate you pointing that out.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Dudley Middle.
Okay.
So, much like what Mr. Packett had said, we experienced a new testing platform, which is always an added layer of stress to not only the kids and the teachers, but our operations in general. I have to say the staff at Dudley Middle School did a wonderful job at kind of taking the contrary view to Ms. Antachi's point about test prep. It was a little bit more about that learning piece, which is helpful. We've got 2 words on the front of our building. It's students first. And, the academic side to that, along with our 3-point plan, is really important for us to focus on hitting those relationships. And some of the key highlights in the data are shown in that high need subgroup. When you heard Ms. Pastore and Ms. Seibel talk about the high need subgroup, that's the capture group of, kiddos who fall into 2 or more tested subgroups. And, typically they're economically disadvantaged and students with disabilities. When kids walk through the door, if they are made to feel cared for and loved, and they understand that they can get the support that they need, and they're not able to learn at the level of other kids, they're going to get the instruction to help them get to that level. And the high needs group, there are a lot of highlights in the data. I'm not going to read through the percentages. You can see those, or you can look on the DESI site. But that's really indicative of the support programs that we have in place, the use of exploratory, like Mr. Packard mentioned, to be able to provide individualized, a small group attention to students who have some gaps in their learning. Our ACES program to address, social emotional learning, but also provide some academic support. It's a model that I referenced last spring when we were talking about budget that we're really looking to tighten up and expand down the road. So these pieces are really important to what we do as a middle school, and there are a lot of complementary programs back and forth across the district that we see. Mr. Packett and I have had a lot of really strong conversations with our staff and collaborative conversations with our leadership team about the importance of being on the same page curriculum-wise, instructionally, grade level to grade level, classroom to classroom, not on the same page per day, but the same page in terms of expectation. So in order for us to, in math in particular, one of the key areas for us is focusing on the instructional delivery and the level of rigor to address our students who are in the exceeding category, the new MCAS score categories. We've got exceeding, meeting, partially meeting, and not meeting. Our not meeting is a small enough population where we can understand it. Our partially meeting is a reasonable number. Our meeting is a larger number of our population, and our exceeding is smaller. You can see by the concentrator, the areas of growth, that we're lagging behind the state average in that score category of exceeding. So how do we address that? We provide some more rigorous instruction. We work with our teachers to develop higher order questioning techniques, different assessment strategies, focusing on project and problem-based learning experiences, be able to bring in different strategies into the classroom that students can experience the math as opposed to go through and complete some rote practice and check off the correct answers. It's more about that engaging in discourse and dialogue. So that's one of the areas that we'll be focusing on. Second area is utilizing our benchmark testing and benchmark assessments for all students, Title I, special education, and students in the gen ed classrooms of all levels, identifying where we're strong, where we're weak instructionally as teachers, where we're strong, where we're weak as population of students, and utilizing exploratory time, utilizing our instructional model to deliver experiences that meet the needs. We are engaging in a widespread push-in model this year for special education. We've decreased the number of students in pull-out math classes in particular, and we have more co-teaching going on. That model's off to a really good start. We've received some great feedback from kids. We've received some good feedback from the teachers. We've identified some challenges that the teachers have as well in terms of implementing a really effective co-teaching model. And that's a good problem to have because it's forcing us to have some real good dialogue about teaching practice. And what we have are some amazing special educators who are great at knowing how to teach. And we have some great content teachers who are great at knowing how to teach math. So when those conversations come together, now the rubber's hitting the road. So that's really where we're going to see some key momentum, utilizing that professional learning community model and communication. So that really is just a highlight of math. And English language arts, again, when you look at that exceeding category, that differential between Dudley Middle School and the state, very similar numbers to the math across the board, almost exact. Where that level of rigor and level of expectation for the exceeding students, those highest achieving performers, is lagging behind. So looking to fully utilize the grades 7 through 12 writing model that's been in place now for a year. Well, it was rolled out at the end of last year. It was created by DCRSD ELA teachers. Being able to engage students in more of a peer editing and self-editing writer's workshop model with the classroom teachers. And, you know, again, piggybacking that towards the instructional model for students with disabilities, going towards more of a co-taught model, in particular in 7th and 8th grade. What we're finding is our 5th and 6th grade English language arts student special ed population is doing okay compared to the state average. 7th and 8th grade, it's a little bit further behind, but not really enough to warrant putting an area of concern down. But in preparing the kids for 9th grade writing, we want to be able to ratchet that up a bit. So leaving towards a more of a co-taught model in 7th and 8th grade is where we're heading. And in science technology, with the introduction of Project Lead the Way and our STEM programming, focusing on project-based learning, and really starting to understand the next generation science standards of this 2016 new frameworks for science and how the spiraling curriculum works. We see that, we're testing kids in 5th grade, then we're again testing them in 8th grade, 6th and 7th grade science instruction. Are we really teaching those standards at a developmentally appropriate level? So when those standards spiral through each of those grades and get back to 8th grade, and the instruction happens at the 8th grade level, is that meeting their needs for that 3-year grade span of testing? And this isn't about the test, but it's about preparing kids to think scientifically and act scientifically and understand the concepts at a high level. So examining that instructional model 6 and 7 is really important for us. So we're doing a lot of work with the vertical conversations. And that's really where we're at with an overview. I'm not going to get into the numbers unless you really want me to.
Good job. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Chaplin?
Some more comfortable chairs here. I can sell you some from Shepherd Hill. Red Sox are up 1-0 if anyone's interested. I always go last. Remember last year I said, can I go first this year?
Maybe we will. We'll start with the...
Ah, you said that last year. I do have something I'm going to pass out in the end here. But yeah, you got the information that I sent out. I didn't include numbers. I can quickly go through that now. Mary and I agree. This is really one data point that I look at. We look at it as a guidepost to see where we can dig down and look at. But it's one piece. We move on from this, and the kids that are struggling in those gaps, we look at how we can continue to build that capacity and amplify their learning in those areas. I mean, the work is really done. You know, we're always talking about the Shepherd Hill graduate, but I know for the secondary principals, we're talking about who's the Shepherd Hill freshman and how prepared they are for certain things. So we're going to continue those discussions. The ELA, I go and count every kid when I get the initial data. We had 285 kids take the test. 93% were advanced and proficient. 11 were needs improvement, and 2 failed. And you're going to see some common denominators between each of them. But I have to point out in terms of, I know 2 or 3 of these failures are kids that came in, put their name on the test, and then put their head down on the table. I know that because their life is miserable. But DESE says they have to come in and put their name on the test. So the numbers are the numbers. We're just looking at how we can kind of turn back around and launch them over the 720 days that we have them at the high school. So in ELA, we're strong. I think they set our numbers, our target to be 100% next year instead of 98% this year. Like I said, we had 2 failures. A lot of the things that you said you looked at in your form there that I gave you in terms of celebrating, 54% of the students achieved advanced compared to 48. So we're trending in the right direction in terms of our advanced and proficient in ELA. And there's a lot of factors that contribute to that. Our English department has done a great job in terms of collaborating 7 through 12 over the last couple of years. They've implemented a lot of different things that we've done in terms of the PSAT test prep that we do for 9th and 10th grade courses, and they incorporate things in there so students can critically analyze the complex reading passages that they know they're going to have moving forward. A couple areas that they're concentrating on in ELA. Students are above the state average in multiple choice responses, but our students could improve in their open response writing, so 64% versus the state at 65%. Students that needed more practice in inference and understanding connotation, while they're able to perform multiple choice tests in critical thinking. One of the things that we're looking at, they've done a really good job over the last year in bringing in some really good instructional techniques and incorporating them in terms of keys to literacy, really 7 through 12. And doing a lot of collaboration on that. So, in ELA, we've always been strong compared to the state and other areas. So this year it is going to be, right now we're dealing with the old tests. So this year it is going to be the new test electronically. I think the adults are more nervous than the kids because they've already gone through it throughout middle school. We had a test run last year. We'll be fine. We're more worried about drops and losing the web at Shepherd Hill. For math, we had 286 kids take the test. 221 of them were advanced and proficient. We had a needs improvement of 50 students and 11 failures, which is a little bit of a blip. We're looking at that. Only the failures have to retake the test. The needs improvement, they've met their MCAS requirement. We just really track them in terms of their course offerings and try to continue with their rigor through their course selections and so forth, and continue to look at it. One of the things we are doing in the math department is, last year we realized, I wouldn't even know how to do this, in terms of doing math equations and so forth electronically. That's hard, you know that. So one of the things that we incorporated this year through one of our textbook publishers is we incorporated a program called ALEKS, A-L-E-K-S, which really differentiates and individualizes students where they're at in terms of their baseline and helps them kind of loop back around and develop those skill sets all on the computer. So that's going to be, we have a 6-year license with that program. So we're really looking forward to reflecting on that year after year and seeing how what the dividends are that would pay off. And that would specifically be in terms of algebra and geometry classes, like we said here. So that's really math. I mean, you looked at it. Science is a little bit of an anomaly. Middle school, there's a lot of cross-section of science that they have to kind of cover, and then they get to high school, and many of our students choose the biology MCAS exam. over the last couple of years, we've moved that from 10th grade to 9th grade. So 9th graders are taking that right away. And this year, we took about 387 kids took it, because we still had that combination of 10th and 9th graders taking it. Next year will be totally 9th grade. And 259 were advanced and proficient. About a little over 100 were needs improvement, and we had 19 failures. A couple of those, I have to point out, as we dug down, a couple of those needs improvement and failures were transfers in. They weren't even ours last year. So, but their rating comes with them when they move into the district. So again, what's written on here, we're going to really concentrate on the high number of kids that didn't pass, the 19 kids, really across all the subgroups, and continue to look at the number one predictor are the wordy questions that they provide, and that's really across all the high schools. And we're looking at how the standards are going to be overlapped, 2006, 2016, they're just updated. So our department head in science really collaborates with the Midwalk science department heads, and they're seeing a similar pattern throughout. And so one of the ways they're going to innovate and do differently next year is include multiple modes of instruction for the standards. Now that we know 2016 standards are in there, a lot of the labs are going to cover those standards. We did look at, when we dug down, that a lot of students were performing below the state average in genetics and ecology. So we're going to look at how we cover those within the classes, and really continue to look at how we teach, and not just really focus on this number. I could never stand that. It's one little blip. Because the other thing, you can see the trends from 8th grade to 10th grade, and then from 10th grade, we look at our SAT scores, our PSATs, and almost everybody graduates. You have to really not want to graduate, not graduate high school. And we know who those students are. The factors moving forward for us, they've added some categories that you went over at the last meeting about chronic absenteeism, whether it's excused or not. They're looking at that 18 as a benchmark. It's 10% of the 180 days. So we're always looking at that, how we get kids in here. But, many of those are excused. We have kids that have medical illnesses. So that might be a ding moving forward that we're going to look at. I always look at the other new thing that they're going to be looking in terms of our accountability and our ratings is going to be the number of only 11th and 12th graders that take advanced classes. So our AP courses, our Project Lead the Way courses are right on the cusp of being approved as well, the dual enrollment classes. And we have a lot of kids that take those opportunities. So that'll help us in terms of meeting some targets as well in terms of the accountability system. And then the number of kids that go on to college. And I know I mentioned last year, the importance of the number of kids that stay in college, that second year. So I do have some DESE, and this is just area schools. So take a peek at it, where I have a little arrow where we are. And this basically just shows straight numbers in terms of the number of our students that stay in, it's called persistently enrolled in college. So that really means they showed up the second year. And, we're right up there in the area in terms of our kids being prepared and staying in college. Everyone get one? So we're right in the middle. There's a little blue arrow there. So basically these, and they're going to be collecting this data. Obviously, they track that cohort of students. So pretty much across the board, you'll see, with the exception of a couple of towns, many people, and they're talking about a cohort, so people that start college generally end within 5 years. They generally do it. I was on the 4.5-year plan when I back in the 80s. Enrollment in college immediately, so right after college, right after high school, what was the percentage of enrollment? And then the third number is really the most important, the kids that are enrolled in college in that cohort and stayed in and showed up the second year. And so we'll continue to track this as we go forward. But like Mary said, it's one blip on the screen for me. I use it as a nice guiding tool, but I don't stay there, because it's more important for kids to have good learning experiences about how to work together, because we don't know what the world's gonna be like in 10 years or 15 years. And I'd rather kids know how to collaborate and work together and look and see problems and then be able to take a process to solve problems. So I know, I mean, you heard that meeting, it's always in the news, it's always the headlines this time of the year. Drives me bonkers. But it is what it is, so.
Any
Questions? I
Thank
never get
you.
any
Good
questions
job.
either.
Report of the Policy Review Subcommittee. Mary, is
Yes.
that you?
Okay, I have a handout. So I'll pass that this way, pass that this way.
Thank you.
Okay, so, first of all, I was selected as chair, so I will give the update.
Congratulations.
Why, thank you, I was thrilled. Okay, so the first thing we did was kind of set the ground rules for how we are going to operate. So I'll kind of read through this with you. In order for the policy subcommittee to perform the necessary review of district policies and provide recommendations, the subcommittee must take appropriate approach to this process. That is, we determine to assess policy in terms of federal and state legal requirements. Is there a federal or state law that necessitates a policy? Address the policies that are needed on our district level for effective operation, fiscal management, and in support of student outcomes. In looking at this work, we are consulting with outside resources for guidance and support, including MASC, and where necessary, legal counsel. Legal advice and guidance we are receiving thus far includes: have the policies that are required by law. If there is a policy, it must be followed, and avoid having too many policies as it is too hard to follow them all, and it results in making too many exceptions. When we began this process, we pushed back the proposed schedule of policy reviews in order to review policy GCG at the request of the school committee. The request was to look at the policy with a particular case in mind. However, the role of the policy subcommittee is to review the policies comprehensively. While the charge to review this policy appeared very simple in nature, to address the exception request that an individual brought before the school committee, as we began to review the policy, it became a very complex puzzle. To date, the policy subcommittee has met twice with over 8 hours of meeting time to investigate all of the various components and implications of this policy alone. At this point in time, we are still working through all of the questions that are being raised to ensure that we are legally compliant with both federal and state regulations. First, it was discovered that there was an erroneous duplicate policy, GCF, which I believe is in your packet, dated June 8th, 2011, which was replaced by policy GCG on October 14th, 2015. So we recommend the deletion of policy GCF, which is an error. I'm not sure if we need a motion
I
to do that.
think we will do a
Okay,
motion.
so
Do you want it right now? Or do
I
you-
can read through the whole thing
Okay.
and then we can go back
Okay.
to it. Okay. Additionally, we have been advised by legal counsel of the conflict that this policy raises in relation to our DCTA contract. Caution must be given regarding the benefits and treatment of substitutes, which are temporary employees. According to legal counsel, attorney Jim Cosgrove, having policy express that substitutes receive similar benefits to permanent teachers on a union contract implies that substitutes are in fact covered by the union contract and represented by the DCTA. Legal counsel further states that because the DCTA contract expressly excludes subs, in essence, we would be forcing the DCTA to negotiate benefits for non-union personnel. And we can see in the DCA contract in Article 1, Paragraph B, that that's the case. Under the prevailing labor law in the Commonwealth, an argument could be made by the DCTA that it is a prohibited practice to tie substitute teacher benefits to those received by members of its bargaining unit, since that arguably requires the association to negotiate benefits for people who are not members of the union and whom it does not represent. MASC is also not aware of any other districts that give substitutes benefits of teacher contracts and recommends against it as it sets the districts up for an influx of requests and exception making. We have also been looking at Mass General Law, Section 1, Chapter 149, which was amended on July 1st, 2015, to include Section 148C regarding local earned sick time. This information was brought to our attention at our recent meeting on October 22nd. We have compiled a new list of questions that have necessitated that Dr. Nash work with Attorney Cosgrove to provide us with clarification and guidance. Another component that we are addressing in our review of this policy pertains to the administration's concern with being able to attract qualified day-to-day substitutes. This topic is included in our analysis of current substitute pay rates and our relative competitiveness among other schools in our area. As part of our policy revision recommendation, the policy subcommittee will attach a pay scale recommendation. Mr. Matthew is currently performing analysis in this area. It is also our intention to address a concern raised by Interim Superintendent Nash that our current policy places an unnecessary restriction on the superintendent in hiring extended employment substitutes in hard-to-fill positions. We recently had just such a case. The intent of the policy subcommittee is to come back to the full school committee with a simple and clear policy that meets the requirements of the law, eliminates any conflict with the law, serves the entire district, and is fiscally responsible. Further, as we begin to ask questions regarding how the administration surrounding the policy currently works, further issues were raised as to the management of employee benefits and payroll at central office. Uncovered were several ineffective and costly processes of managing and monitoring teacher absences, teacher sick and personal days, vacation time, payroll, pay differential management, and substitute management. At this time, all of those areas are managed through manual entry, duplication of effort, and manual paper analysis and reporting. It is our recommendation to refer this to the Budget and Finance Subcommittee, as preliminary investigation has been performed by central office staff regarding possible software solutions. So that's that policy. Policy JQ, student food services account was reviewed per state law requirements. We're happy to say our district is in compliance with the law, as we do not deny student lunch under any circumstances. This policy will be revisited, however, and reviewed fully as part of the policy subcommittee schedule at a later date. The A Foundation and Basic Commitments Policy Review that were first on our schedule, a brief discussion began regarding this grouping of policies, and it was determined that updated laws pertaining to these must be considered as part of the review process. I just contacted MASC today for updated laws regarding these policies. The next meeting date of the Policy Subcommittee is scheduled for Monday, October 29, 2018 at 10 a.m. at Shepherd Hill.
Okay, any questions?
Very thorough.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Good,
It was
thank
a
you.
big,
A lot more than you thought.
yeah,
Yeah.
So
big
the
barrel
point
of
of-
monkeys.
The point GCF, what happened, when we amended it, we should have pulled that out, and we didn't.
We should have pulled it
It was
out.
just a clerical mistake,
Yes.
basically.
So
that's okay.
basically, we just need to.
So I'll make a motion, we delete policy GCF because of redundancy, really.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. Thank you, Mary, very thorough.
Anything else you need to motion?
Not yet. More to come.
Okay. And last but not least, consideration of MASC, MASS joint conference resolutions, and we do vote on each one of them. And this is for the delegate
Okay.
at the meeting.
Would you like me to read those?
Yes.
Okay. Resolution number 1, you have, I believe, a summary of each of these, or you have your or you have your booklet, is the resolution entitled Rejecting the Arming of Educators. The resolution is that MASC rejects the notion of providing firearms to any educators. The safest environment would be to provide additional mental health resources and violence prevention programs in public schools. The explanation behind this resolution is that this particular resolution, as you are well aware, addresses a number of recent federal initiatives to provide safer schools by potentially arming school personnel, including teachers. The resolution rejects that approach and argues for further mental health and violence prevention strategies in the classroom and in school. Opponents may argue that arming educators under appropriate standards and safety precautions could prevent school shootings or other acts of violence that have led to the deaths and the injury of children and adults.
I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation of the MASC.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion on it? All in favor? Motion carries.
Is that really, are you the voting person? Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, so that's done.
Okay. All right. The second resolution is on small and rural districts. I think we heard this discussed a little bit when we were at the recent Mars meeting. Mass called for the creation of a working group to advise the legislative body on the best public policy solutions to support those small and rural school districts, and further, that this working group proposed modifications to the foundation budget and other elements of Chapter 70 financial assistance program to designate specific instances where excessive regulation interfere with the ability of school leaders to direct the academic improvement of children, to identify and advise on eligibility for state and federal programs to support public education, and find strategies to ameliorate the impact of forces that jeopardize the growth, stability, and success of these school districts, and further, that Mass oppose any legislation or unlegislated regulations that would attempt to undermine the right of any city, town, or regional district to have imposed upon it a mandate to restructure, to expand, to regionalize, or dissolve its school district without its consent. So something that I think many of you are probably aware of, particularly in small districts. Regional districts addressing low economies of scale, economic recession, rising costs such as transportation, and declining enrollment need additional financial assistance and regulatory flexibility to operate successfully. This resolution would ask the state to authorize the Foundation Budget Review Commission or the legislature itself to study and implement changes to the FB, Foundation Budget, to support small and rural districts. Further, mindful of previous attempts by the state Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to coerce districts to consolidate against their will, this resolution would prevent the legislature or state agency from requiring a school district to change its format without its consent. Opponents would argue that some small and rural districts might require state intervention to make their fiscal, academic, operational, and structural status more efficient, and would not do so without state intervention.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to go along with the MASC's recommendation.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on it? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. It's unanimous.
Resolution 3, elimination of the Federal Department of Education. So be it resolved that the Mass Association of School Committees works with the federal delegation to reject any notion of combining the U.S. Department of Education with other governmental departments. Explanation. A consolidation of federal cabinet agencies has been suggested by the Trump administration. Previously, this function was part of the Federal Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, HEW, before being separated out into a separate Department of Education, the U.S. DOE. Advocates believe that, however, the unpopular administration at U.S. DOE may be, Advocates believe that, however unpopular there's an extra "the" in there. The administration at US DOE may be. Public education requires a discrete voice among the bureaucracies. We'll get rid of the other "among." Maybe we should send this back to NIC. Opponents may argue that the United States Department of Education is part of an oversized federal bureaucracy and can easily be accommodated as part of a more efficient, consolidated agency.
My motion would go along with the recommendation of MASC.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Okay.
Resolution 4 now.
Wrote the next one a little bit better. Resolution 4 is regional school transportation. Gee, I've seen this for so many years. I think I'd like to read part of the whereas, because I think this came up in discussions last year when we tried a consolidated bid, if I remember. I was sitting in another district, but you were part of that. Whereas, among the transportation cost concerns for regional school districts is the lack of competition for bus contracts for regular day services, as well as the steadily mounting cost for special education transportation. And whereas MGL Chapter 71, Section 7C prohibits certain uses of regional transportation authorities to provide school district transportation services. And whereas elimination of MGL Chapter 71, Section 7C would free the regional school districts and regional transportation authorities to collaborate on plans to provide safe and efficient transportation alternatives that lessen the financial impact on both the districts and the Commonwealth. And whereas the lack of bidders on school transportation contracts requires a deeper analysis by the appropriate state officials, and therefore be it resolved that to promote greater competition for bus service contracts, the legislature should eliminate MGL Chapter 71 7C and authorize a deeper analysis of the lack of bidders on school transportation contracts. Explanation. In order to overcome a paucity of bidders for public school transportation contracts, and in light of the severe cost burden upon districts to pay for both regional and municipal school districts, this resolution urges an analysis of why few bidders emerge, how better competition might be obtained, or what collaborations might emerge. Critics of this policy would point to the state's bidding laws and regulations as sufficient, or cite that the problem might be better addressed by full funding of regional transportation as established in law, but subject to appropriation and currently less than 100%. We can speak to this because last year we started as a group of 5 or 6 districts to look at a collaborative process in hopes that we would receive a lower cost for all of the districts. That did not happen, and as one of the 2 districts remaining in this collaborative approach, we received 1 bid. And we were quite frankly told why we received that single bid. And so the step for us to try to initiate a collaborative approach, thinking that economy of scale would get us a better, did not. In fact, quite frankly, it got us so aggravated that I think we could have written this.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the recommendation from MASC.
So moved, right?
Do I have a second? Did I have a second? I didn't hear it. Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. We're on Resolution 5.
Okay, this Resolution 5 is regarding reporting and accountability standards. The Massachusetts Association of School Committees works with the legislature and the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education to ensure that all students in schools that receive public funds under the authority of the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education or a local public school district are held to the same standards and requirements in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Explanation of this. Some public schools, such as charter schools, are exempted from some of the state regulations imposed on non-charter public schools. In addition, some private and quasi-public schools receive funding for various programs, but are not subjected to the same standards imposed on public school districts. This resolution would require any school that receives DESE funding to be subject to the same standards as all of the other public schools. Opponents of this resolution would see this as limiting the ability of charter schools to have the flexibility needed to be an effective alternative to public education, or that private and religious schools who may accept some public funding through DESE might be inappropriately targeted for state regulation. They would argue that state education regulation, widely regarded as harsh and punitive in nature, would be inappropriate to private institutions or charter schools where exemptions may exist.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve recommendation of MASC Resolution 5.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Or second.
Doesn't matter.
So Catherine made the motion, and second by Stephanie. And discussion, seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. It's unanimous.
Has anybody looked at the Red Sox? They're ahead 1-0.
Wow, good.
2-1.
In the wrong way.
In the wrong way,
Well, that
uh-oh.
was a third. If I read this fast enough, maybe.
Maybe it'll
Okay.
happen.
Resolution
Six.
6, regarding reproductive health education. The Massachusetts Association of School Committees supports evidence-based reproductive health curricula. Further, we would call upon the U.S. Department of Education and Executive Branch stop their support of abstinence-only education. The explanation. There exists a debate over the appropriate content of sexual and reproductive health education. Recent federal initiatives may lead to limiting funding for programs to prevent teen pregnancy and adverse health outcomes to those which teach abstinence-only or rhythm method-based curricula. Advocates for this resolution would prevent the diversion of funds from broader reproductive health education content to abstinence-based curricula, which they view as inadequate and naive. Opponents would argue that only abstinence-based educational programs would meet their standards for ethical behavior consistent with their principles and beliefs, leaving further education to parents.
Okay, motion of approval of the MASC recommendation, Resolution 6. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Okay.
Second.
And I have a second. Discussion? All in
I'm
favor?
voting no.
What?
I think it's too wishy-washy. I don't think it's
Okay.
really facts. I'm just stating.
Yeah,
what
all right. So, all in favor? Opposed? Okay.
So, just because this is my first time
Doesn't
going
matter.
to this,
You
you just say this is
Majority.
what you
We're
would like to
setting it
do.
up for you, yeah.
Okay. Want to make sure I understand how
Yeah,
to
yeah.
report
Yeah.
that. We had one.
So far, you're supporting all of them.
No, we rejected one.
No, we didn't. Kathy opposed this one, but we've supported all of them. Okay.
Then I understood it wrong.
They're all yeses so far.
Yeah.
Resolution 7 on gender identity inclusive athletic participation policy was submitted by the Framingham School Committee. Now therefore it be resolved that Mass help file legislation which would have the effect of protecting LGBTQ students from discrimination, harassment, and bullying by that schools should treat students based on their gender identity, protecting their privacy, providing access to gender-neutral restrooms, locker rooms, and private stall showers, using their preferred pronouns, embedding sensitivity training and professional development, and providing uniform accommodations. Rationale: the at-risk behavior for LGBTQ students, which includes suicidal ideation, is sharply reduced with some basic interventions. With federal laws that are vague with the protections for our vulnerable students, public schools in Massachusetts should take steps to ensure their protection. With guidance from the legislature, LGBTQ students throughout Massachusetts will have better protections and will have reduced adverse behaviors. Explanation: this resolution addresses various forms of discrimination based on gender identity and seeks to protect students from such bias in various public school venues and at school-sponsored activities. In particular, it addresses such items as uniform accommodations for athletes regardless of gender identity and other areas where federal protections are vague. Opponents may argue that federal protections should be adequate and that this represents more intrusive regulation on the area of sexual identity.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the approval of MASC Resolution 7. Do I have a motion? Okay. Second? Someone?
Second.
Okay. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, go ahead.
Mrs. Terry, I'd be very curious as to how they explain providing uniform accommodations. Not that it's going to change the vote, but I'd be interested in understanding what uniform accommodations are.
And Jamie might, or Kathy might come back with that answer.
That would be good.
Okay.
Or they may not.
Might not be discussed.
They'll leave it up to the school.
All in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
All right. Resolution 8, relative to sports wagering. Listen up, Mr. Packard. Didn't we? We talked about not sports wagering, but some kind of football pool or something. I know. What? Anyway, this is not it, though, so don't worry. The Massachusetts Association of School Committees requests that should the general court enact legislation to legalize wagering on sporting events, the general court shall commit a portion of the revenues generated from sports wagering to public education.
Anything like that.
You don't have to read the
You
explanation.
know, would you like me to read the explanation or not?
No.
Okay, okay,
We can,
okay.
okay,
That's fine. I'm fine for that.
okay,
Yes, I'd make a motion to accept the recommendation of the MASC.
okay. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. And one more.
Last resolution, relative to access to information for parents and students who are clients of special education. MASC urges the legislative body to amend state laws to require that parents and students be provided with a copy via email or mail of all the assessments that are performed for students in the family's preferred language at least 5 days prior to any meeting at which parents and students will review a proposed individual education plan, IEP. Explanation. Families of students served by special education programs, and particularly those who are English language learners, frequently benefit from having information about their children provided in time to allow them to advocate for their children. This information may be brief or complex and require not only time to digest, but also translation and explanation. This resolution would seek legislation to require that information be provided to parents at least 5 days prior to an IEP meeting and be provided in the family's preferred language. Well, that's an interesting punctuation. Opponents of this resolution explain that it is not always possible to prepare all the information in every family's preferred language, and that the language of the resolution may subject school districts to higher cost or litigation should they fail to comply.
Okay, motion to approve the MASC Resolution 9. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Go ahead.
Mrs. Terry, I would ask you to make an amendment to this language. Okay. And I can help you write this. I can help you write this, but the requirement in both state and federal law is that that parents are required to request for copies of the assessments in writing. They're not automatically delivered. So this language needs to change to eliminate that request in writing. I can help you with that, but otherwise, this is in conflict to law, because unless a parent requests, the school district is not required to provide.
So does,
She'll give you the amendment.
no, I thought it said, provided with copy via email or mail.
They don't have to, the parents.
Right,
when
but
asked.
the-
All you have to say is when asked,
Asked.
and requested.
That's
You're
it.
saying verbal counts.
So they said you
No.
have to ask for it first before you.
No,
send
it
to
has to
them.
be requested in writing. That's by law. A lot of districts proactively provide without it being requested, but it is not,
According to law.
not according to law.
If you're going to put forth an amendment, they only accept it in writing, so you have to have
Yeah,
it prepared.
I knew that.
Is this even feasible
I mean, it makes sense.
in any language?
But here's the
feasible?
requirement. You're required to do it regardless of whether or not it's convenient or not. I know we had this discussion when Mrs. O'Brien was the special administrator, that knowing what languages were required in the district, she had resources for translation.
Okay.
Some of them are more difficult to find than others. But if you don't meet this requirement, then the family can actually file a civil rights violation, which puts it in federal, and then in part of that, filing that complaint, you can request what resolution you want.
So we kind of have to do it anyway.
You have to do it.
Okay.
Why are we
All right.
already, it should be
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
Why are we voting
don't
on it
understand.
if it's law?
Because this is separate things. This is special education law. And civil rights is disability law. They're two different things. The complaint resolution process is different for both.
But you have the same requirements providing the material?
No, it's a
Okay.
different thing. When you're filing an OCR violation, it's because you're discriminating against a family. So a family would be filing a discrimination complaint because you were not providing and implementing something that's required by a different kind of law.
Okay,
If
so we're
that makes sense,
voting
and I just
with,
confused you.
with the amendment. You're going to help.
I'll help, I'll
Yeah,
help.
right.
write it.
Okay, any other questions before we take the vote on it? All in favor? Okay, motion carries, it's unanimous. And Jamie, I think you were thinking of the resolution where it said rejection, but we're approving the MASC. Oh, okay. Because you thought it was a no vote, it's still a yes vote. 'Cause we're,
I followed it along now that you told me.
Oh,
I'm glad I
okay,
asked.
thank you.
But can I ask this? What happens if I propose the amendment and they don't go with the amendment?
Through the chair, one of the things that we always allow people to do is because we're making judgment on very simple things, but the committee or the person, if it's the MASC board, legislative board that proposes this, is going to stand up and give their rationale for it. Other people could be coming in and putting in amendments, people are going to speak to it for and against. Based on our discussion, we're giving you guidance, but we always give leeway to, if you hear a swaying argument that counters the point that we've made, we've always had the leeway to turn around and vote in the best interest of the district based on the information presented.
yeah, because you're going to hear arguments, and so you have the right to change the vote if you ever sway.
Just if I can point out, Mrs. O'Queen, it's not a resolution, but there's a proposal at the very end of this that they're going to look to change a date. That will be a vote that's taken as part of the delegate assembly. So you should be aware of that. It's on page 27 of the booklet, that they're looking to have submissions move from July 1st to June 1st. So there'll be an extra vote.
Does anybody care one way or another?
I think it makes sense because in July, a lot of people are on vacation.
Okay, so if I go along with what they're recommending, you're fine.
Right. Okay, that brings us up to next meeting dates. School Committee, Wednesday, November 14th. We'll be here again at the Charlton Middle School at 7 p.m. Wednesday, December 12th, at Shepherd Hill, 7 p.m. Then we have a Budget and Finance Subcommittee, Wednesday, November 14th. That'll be at the Charlton Middle School at 5 p.m. Our Policy Review Subcommittee is Monday, October 29th. That'll be at Shepherd Hill, and that will be at 10.
I'm just going to throw this out there as a possibility for the Budget and Finance Subcommittee meeting, because of the amount that seems to be being added to the agenda. I don't know if people would want to consider convening at 4:30, so that we have time between the meeting, because meetings have been running late, and I know we were looking for food the last time, so to have a little bit of a break, so that we could eat would be great.
So we'll change that one to
4:30.
4:30 on November 14th. Future agenda items, Policy Review Subcommittee, report of the delegate. Anybody want to add anything right now?
We have to post this superintendent search orientation meeting on November 28th, if you could put that on your radar screen.
All right, November 28th.
The question of debt exclusion, if we're going to keep it or not.
Okay, good.
And we need to set a meeting for the calendar study subcommittee.
Go ahead, Jamie.
I'm not gonna be here November 14th.
We can
I know
just
I can be, but just a reminder.
We did it in one meeting last time, we were very efficient.
Good. All right.
So Kathleen, you'll report on the conference on the 14th? So you and Jamie will have to confer.
We're gonna hang out.
Yes, so you'll bring the report back from the conference.
We also need to assign a different school committee person to that.
Well, we've decided, because I did check with others, we're only going to have 2 people. We've done that in the past. Joe and Ray were 2. So it's going to be Kathy and Jamie for the negotiations, okay?
Yeah.
You 2 are okay with that? We've done that in the past. All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? We're adjourned.